go ahead and get started. So, real quick, Chief Terry's on his way back. He should be here, and he had to go down to Irvine for an event this morning, but he'll be here hopefully around 6:30 or 7, and he'll be able to answer any questions towards the end there. We had some discussions over the last meeting and kind of offline just about the amount of DPD personnel and why they're here. It would probably take a lot of time to go and introduce each one of them, but we wanted to let you guys know that the reason why we have so much staff here is because each one of these people are involved with the stipulated agreement in one sort or the other. It could be from a command level, it could be from an implementation level at the ground. So one of the things we want our department to see from the chief to our trainees is how does this process work? What do the philosophies look like? What do the concepts look like? And then how do we actually implement it in a training environment and hold our officers accountable to actually doing the things that we're saying we're doing and that we want to do. So that's why they're here. Next month, as we start moving into our use of force and presenting on our policy, and that's when we kind of talked about breaking up into subgroups and talked about those things. We're going to have some of our employees throughout the organization at the tables with you, kind of discussing that. So hopefully during that meeting, you'll get to know them a little bit more and be involved in kind of that engagement process. But that's the reason why they're all here. Every one of the people who are here from DPD are involved in that process at some level or another. So I wanted to provide some clarity on that. So with that, I want to jump into, we do have a majority here, so I want to make a motion for the approval of minutes. Last time, did everybody get a chance to see the minutes that sent out? Mr. Evans, is your name spelled correctly on this one, sir?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right, anybody want to make a motion to approve meeting minutes? Mr. Sheldon? Anybody second it?
Second.
Ms. Johnson? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, cool. Minutes are approved. All right, the goal tonight is what we're going to do is we're going to start out the meeting and continue with the discussion that we had from last month regarding the K-9 recommendations and the presentation provided by Captain King and the rest of the K-9 team to just continue that discussion, to be able for you to ask questions as to why decisions were made about that, about the policy, what was considered, and just to have some dialogue. We can do this till about 6:30 or so, 6:45. We'll see what time looks like because we do have a presenter that is going to be here to present on use of force kind of more generally. And during that, when we get to that phase, we'll probably take a short break. I'll hand it over to Captain Blakemore. He can do an introduction and allow you guys to ask any questions of him as he kind of starts to present from his expertise and his knowledge base. Okay? So that's kind of what tonight's going to look like. In the meantime, if you need drinks, food, take a break. Folks come in, we're just going to continue going where we're going. So if there's no questions or comments at this time, I'll hand it over to Captain King to kind of continue with K-9s and the discussion that we had from last month.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you're all doing well today. Okay, so since our last meeting, we agreed to come back and talk about any questions or concerns that had come up from that meeting and into this one. We do have a limited time because we're trying to get this trying to get a hard stop so we can get you the information that's coming with the use of force group. So I wanted to start off by introducing everybody to the CAT system. That was one of the concerns that people had was, or that was received through the feedback, is wanting to know more about the CAT system. I realize that this is kind of difficult to see, but catsplatinum.com is the vendor website for that. And you're more than welcome to check it out, look at all the fun things that it does, and I think that that's going to give you more than enough information as far as how the system works, what it's designed to do, and the capabilities of that platform.
I think where this came up initially was a couple areas of the policy where, for one, bite ratios, people were wanting to explain how bite ratios are calculated. We should work that into the policy. CATS, with the way it's worked in the policy now, does all the bite ratios. We can run reports based off of all kinds of things and pull up bite ratios how you want them. We can even pull up bite ratios based off of specific types of crimes or searches or different parts of the population. Whatever it is, CATS can quantify all of that and put it into reports for us. The other area was documentation and audits of our narcotics and bombs for our training aids. I believe one of the recommendations was that we keep a log of those and basically conduct an audit quarterly as to the weights of each one of those things and CATS does every bit of that too. Right now, we weigh every single narcotics and EOD training we have quarterly. Sergeant inspects it. That inspection is all documented in the CATS system. Basically, pretty much everything a canine officer does is documented in this system. Anytime the dog's pulled out of the car, the dog's trained, it's all in there. But like the captain said, if you guys want to research it more, take a look at it, you can go to the website and it explains a lot more about what you can use the system for.
Any questions on the CAT system before we move on to the feedback? Yes, ma'am.
But as far as the data is, do we ask, if we wanted data, would we ask you and then you would generate the reports, or is it we could go in and generate the reports?
No, because it's our data and we have to protect the data, right?
Right.
We pull up all the reports, but that's done through an analyst. So the handlers, the people that are in that chain of command, they're the ones who have access to inputting that data. But our analysts pull that data up, and that's how we're responsive to Freedom of Information Act requests, Public Information Act
Okay, so
requests.
it would require Freedom of Act.
Yeah, and that's how we would get any of the stats or anything like that. So more than happy to provide the data, but
Yeah.
we don't want people manipulating the data,
Right.
or else we lose the integrity.
Well, yeah,
So-
that's why I just wanted to clarify.
Right. Now,
How
there
the
is-
data is obtained.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. But a necessary pain. It helps us out. So now, Stephanie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is through our transparency page an opportunity to go look at some of the data that you can click
Oh.
through and see, the bite ratios and how it relates to other uses of force and force options and things like that. And that's all public facing, so you can go in and check it out at any time. So, okay. Yes, ma'am.
Just curious as how this database changed, if at all, since the stipulated judgment to really collect some of the things that were identified?
So this database hasn't changed at all since then. When we obtained this, the licensing to use this platform in 2018, so right after we did a unit audit back then, and with Bill Lewis, and found that there were some areas for improvement, and so this is one of the ways that we decided to do that. Because like Sergeant Williams said, this captures deployments, it captures apprehensions, it captures training, it captures the health of the dogs, both the training of the handler and the dogs, and so we're able to really manipulate data to look at what's actually occurring and hopefully to notice trends so that we can address that through whether it's policy or training or supervision or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't have a stipulated in front of me, but I'm just curious, because if I recall correctly, like specifically the K9 section, it was like, the handler will give like 3 warnings in this language, and they will have to get permission from a higher up to before, so I'm just curious if that is reflected in capturing?
So that's not reflected in CATS, that's reflected in policy, and then it's supported through training. Does that make sense?
There is actually some sections in there where some of that is reflected. I know for engagements specifically, there's a checkbox in there as to whether warnings were given or not. If the warnings were not given, then there has to be specific reasons why. The officer has to explain himself why the warnings weren't given. So, besides him putting that in his police report anyway and explaining that to the sergeant, it also goes into this system too, as to whether warnings were given or not.
So I apologize, I might have misunderstood. CATS isn't giving the direction to do it, it's capturing whether they did it or not. So the direction to do that would come from policy, supervision, and training.
Yeah, I guess I'm comparing it, I'm thinking about some reports that we got before the stipulated judgment and some information that was missing, like even at the end of the day report that was submitted, it happened like months later. So curious if,
Right.
how is CATS
So-
reflecting the changes that are
Was this the
made?
stuff that we talked about with you and Stephanie after the last meeting?
I think it was like how to better get PRAs, but I'm just curious if that, like those specific sections are updated in the system to better collect all the data.
It's difficult to answer that. So if it's the same stuff that Stephanie was talking about, she'd agreed to email me directly, and I never got anything from her. So I was more than happy to, and I still am more than happy to help you out in getting what you want. But the request never came, so.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm just like, if this is a tool.
This is
I'm like,
actually,
the updated.
the system you're talking about is Blue Team, and that's
Right.
what our use of force investigations go through. CATS is completely separate from Blue Team. This is more just documenting of what the officers have done, training-wise, deployment-wise, all that. There are certain activities in CATS, specifically engagements and deployments, that have to be reviewed by a supervisor, and the supervisor has to go in there and approve it once it's done to make sure that it was documented properly, timely, all those types of things. And it coincides with Blue Team and the police report and all of that together, so.
So I have a question on that point. What is currently the procedure? You said handlers input the data. So is it like contemporaneous with writing a police report? You have to do it immediately after a deployment or within 24 hours? Or like what's that procedure and how the data is inputted?
I believe what we're putting into the new policy, it should be one of the changes that, of the most recent one that I put in there, is it has to be done by the end of their shift, so
Okay.
before they go home.
Okay.
Right, that's in there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes.
All right, are we good on cats? Ironically named cats. Yes, sir.
Just one quick question.
Sure.
Do the CATS reports clarify whether there's body cam footage from the incident?
You know what, I don't know the answer to that.
I'm not
There should be body camera. All of us, all of the officers are running body camera all the time, and by that policy, the 425, that anytime they're in contact with the public, the body camera is supposed to be going. So there should be body camera of every contact that we have with the public in an enforcement type setting.
So now that you've been doing body cams for, what, a year or so?
A few years.
What percentage of incidents, for whatever reason, are not recorded with body cam?
I don't know if you have that information stuff, but I know that our last check that we did with Lieutenant Bagby, I want to say that there were probably, we weren't looking at just that, we were looking at the top, I want to say it was 4 violations of the policy, right? And it was about 13%.
Are you talking specifically about canine engagements?
Generally, and canine, if you have them both, I'd love to hear both.
Okay. I don't have them right now.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I'm clarifying.
Okay, yeah, and this is department-wide, it was about 13%, but those were across different reasons of the violation, if that makes sense. And
Sure.
some of it was, I think one of the biggest ones was improper muting, so they turned it off for an administrative discussion, but they didn't say why they turned it off. So it doesn't mean that they necessarily did anything wrong, but by policy, they're supposed to tell the viewer exactly why they muted the audio on their camera. Doesn't turn off the video,
Right.
but, so that would be a violation. Turning the camera on directly and not having that 1-minute buffer of having it in standby is another violation. So there's things like that where the information still gets captured, but it just wasn't done properly. It wasn't done the way that we're directing them to do it. So it's difficult to say exactly what that number is of what isn't recorded. But that would be a pretty big red flag, something that if we have an offense or we have a call for service and there's no corresponding body camera and we send an officer out, that would be a pretty big red flag. So I don't have a number for you.
Thank you.
And I'd probably be lying if I said it's never happened, but that's probably one that's pretty rare.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
In terms of pulling reports from CATS, is there, and not that I'm asking for like a specific answer, for a general answer, is there any policy as to scheduling in how those reports are pulled? For instance, we pull the training audit every 6 months, we pull the bite ratio annually, like, because you said the point, right, is to help identify trends, and so I'm wondering, is there a schedule or procedure as to how often these reports are pulled?
So and please go into more detail on this, but the canine review, the engagements, they go through a vertical supervisor approval process or review process, and they also go through a lateral. So it's difficult to say when the report is pulled, but the incidents themselves are all reviewed. So the details of each incident are reviewed in those 2 different directions, one for appropriateness and compliance with policy, and the other with training standards and practices, and are both the handler and the dog, the team, working the way that we train them to work. So each of those are reviewed. So I guess the review would be before any report is done. And then as far as any recurring reports.
So, moving forward, the stipulated judgment is very specific about canine reports having to go through the approval process. I think it's to the lieutenant all the way up to the captain.
Right.
Our office is working on automating that, so it sends it quarterly in an email to them, like, here you go, here's the elements that you need to look at. That's in the developmental stages.
Okay.
But we do anticipate having it ready to go when the policy's live.
As far as though, like, everything that's put into CATS, whether it's training related, operations related, engagements, use of force, whatever it is, has to be approved by somebody who has supervisory or administrative privileges in CATS. The only people that have that are the supervisors and then our two most senior handlers. Basically, they're senior police officers on the canine unit. The senior handlers are only allowed to approve training documentation. All other uses of force, engagements, everything like that has to be reviewed by a canine supervisor. So nothing gets put into CATS directly by a handler themselves.
Okay.
Handler inputs it, somebody has to approve it and then send it through.
I would be very interested in knowing what the data show from CATS. So what were the various offenses that are being investigated that call for deployment and engagement, et cetera? What were the what were the justifications relied on by the officer for those deployments, engagements, et cetera? I don't know if that's been distilled or analyzed in some
Yeah. Yeah, I think that-
easily digestible way.
That is, in my opinion, a little outside of the scope of this group, but if you, I mean, more than welcome to put in a request for it. We're happy to answer any questions that you have.
I'm not
Yeah,
so sure that it would be outside the scope of
That would be,
this.
so most of the reports that come out of this are generated in like charts and times, and it has the case numbers on there, but the reports are not in CATS. So if you wanted to see like the officer's justification for use of force, you can go into CATS and you can run that officer and say, how many bites did this guy have in the last year? And it's gonna spit out however many case numbers of bites, and now you need to do a public records request for not only that data, but you also gotta do it for the initial offense reports and any other things related to that, so that you can see the total review of each individual incident. That's kind of what the supervisor does, is we go out and we handle the use of force investigation, right? We document it, the officer documents it, and then it's audited at a later time, where they'll look at CATS, they'll look at the police report, they'll look at the use of force investigation, they'll look at the body camera footage, and they'll bring that all in together into an additional auditing form that goes to quality assurance.
So is there not even a mechanism internally to aggregate that information and review it? It sounds like you're saying that each incident is reviewed individually.
Right.
I'm asking about collectively. If CATS doesn't log what were the justifications for the deployment, what were the offenses being addressed?
No, it has all that. It has the offenses, but when you say justification to me, I'm thinking of the narration police report. Like, you
Very
know what I
likely,
mean?
but
So there's no like,
we've both read enough police reports to know that there's a lot of repetition in those segments where they will rely on one factor or another. It's not to challenge the credibility of it at all, but you know, there's certain recurring themes that you'll see that are the justification for the deployment. It sounds like that's not tracked in place, other than in the narrative of the report.
Right, that's gonna be in the narrative.
Yeah.
So the overall offenses and things like that are gonna be tracked both in the narrative and the Versadex side of things, but also in the CATS side of things. So, but you're not gonna get the articulated facts of, well, you'll get a little bit of it in CATS, but where that report lives is in Versadex and the RMS system.
If I may, Captain,
Yep.
just to kind of expand on that a little bit. So I have a different level of access in CAT, so like if you were to put in a PR request, we can get all that data and aggregate it for what you're asking for. I think the way that the canine group looks at it is individually based on incident, because that's what they're doing. It's my job to pull it in an Excel spreadsheet where you can go in and you can do your analysis on it. So that's definitely available, and we can give that out through a public records request.
Well, so to the extent that this panel is here to give suggestions on policy and, the community's input on those things, it
Yeah.
sounds like that information would be not only within our scope, but useful for us to have in order to make those recommendations.
Yeah, I think
Can we
from a
just
department
get that
perspective,
from
it's so we can track it. So we can, track the data coming in and out of the department. A public records request is the best way to do that, on our side, just for tracking mechanisms and purposes.
How quickly, say tomorrow, we did a word request,
Mhm.
what time frame would it take to generate that? Could that be, if it was generated properly, could it be presented at the next meeting for review?
It would depend on the scale of the request, and then we also have other public records requests that came in before that,
Mhm.
so we would have to honor that. And I would have to see just what the scale of the request is. But I don't anticipate that it would take a super long time, because the data's there.
Right, and I think that we're kind of getting bent around the axle about the scope comment, but we're here to have a policy, right? We're here to come up with a policy and the input on that policy so that we can plug it into our PTSR framework. So we have a policy to go off to base training off of, to supervise, and then ultimately to review. So I'm not saying that you're not allowed to have this information or anything like that. What I'm saying is that we've got a job to do, all of us here, right? It's a very important job, because if we don't get this going, then we don't have a policy, or we don't have the current policy with everybody's feedback that is out there for these officers to base everything on.
But
So,
I guess can I raise, I think the bigger issue here was that this is a great tool to track and monitor continued instances, like if there's repeated case. I think that would be very important to really inform the policy as to where is it lacking, why is it the same? And I'm not saying that is the case, but why is this, this officer continues to have,
Right.
high numbers of incidents? And, the justifications are very similar, and
Right.
the population where it's been released is this number. Like, I think that would be important to know of.
it's absolutely important to know, and it's very important to know and to keep us honest, right? It's just that this group, right here, what we're doing right now is to come up with this policy. Okay, how we do it, how well we execute it, those are always gonna be pains that we have to endure, right? And that's where we need you to fact check us, we need you to hold us accountable, and make sure that we're doing the things that the policy says is gonna happen, right? If we get stuck in this, I want all the information right now, just come down and work with us. You know what I mean? Like, you can have access to it all the time. And that might be great, like, it might work out best for all of us. But like I said, we've got a mission right now, all of us, not just us, but it's to get this done and to get this moving so that you can hear from the next folks, because there's plenty of policies that are stacked up waiting for this stuff to be finished.
I know in previous meetings when this was presented, the question of the data came up, and the chief, advised that we have data on the use of on the transparency page, and encouraged everybody to look at it and then submit whatever other data they wanted. From my knowledge, no request had been submitted up until this time frame. So, we have it available, and we've discussed that we'd be willing to get it. Our office hasn't received any requests as of yet for this data.
It's just a little hard to request the data if we don't know the capabilities of the program. So I think today now we're getting a little more information as to the capabilities so that we would be able to formulate a request. I'm sure we could, we
Right.
saw what it's doing, but again, we still don't understand all the dynamics of the
No, that's fair.
And that is a good point. But like we talked about last week, if I came down to any of your jobs and you told me how it works, right? It's gonna take more than 2 hours every other, or every month, right? It's gonna take a while. And whereas you guys are right now getting a view of this stuff, and we're explaining that view as best we can, we live it all the time, so some of this stuff is kind of, we don't emphasize the right things that are necessary sometimes, you know what I mean? And that's just by virtue of what we've got going right now. That said, we do have that stuff, we do have the data, and I would argue that you don't necessarily need to know how it all works. We're happy to explain that, and people that are smarter than me can do that. But tell us, just like we were talking last time, tell us what you want, and we'll help you get the right stuff. Unfortunately, if there's never a request about what you actually want, and it's just a public information request, you get the sliver of information that is directly responsive to that request. If you tell us in general, like, hey, we want this, we want to know the information that's related to this, then, like I said, email me, and I'll tell you exactly what you need to request. You know, the reason for the request is so that we can track how responsive we are. It's not to put a roadblock or anything like that. So, does that make sense? Anything else on cats?
Would it be a useful way to spend our time right now, coming up with what is efficient so that it's not overly burdensome, but way to make this request so that we get what we're looking for and we can have that information for you?
What part of that is gonna better inform you for this? Yeah, I'm not, at all being negative about it. I'm just saying, it's gonna keep us on point, it's gonna keep you better informed.
Yeah, I would think that because, as community members we talk to, you know, about, they care about why the humans are, and they care whether or not people are being hurt, and why we justify it, how, and I don't know whether that data will show us that, but I mean, I think that's why we keep talking about it, is because that's the concern of the community. They're worried, they say so-and-so got hit by a dog and he didn't do nothing, that kind of thing. So it's like, that's, I mean, I don't know if you could give us the data, but maybe you could do a community presentation.
Yeah,
and have
absolutely.
people ask, because that's a very burning question.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a plan after use of force is all done for us to have a town hall meeting, and I don't know if we have details on that right now, but where there will be, we will solicit feedback from the community. It's up on the Conveo page right now, as far as the policy goes. So the work here is certainly not done, but in order to move from one phase to the next, we need to hit some of these thresholds.
And I think, okay, what she's saying is data can sometimes help alleviate those concerns if we, maybe, and again, and I'll be the first to say I haven't totally looked at the transparency page, so that's my fault, but,
That's right.
you know, we have these concerns, we have these specific events that people speak of, and sometimes data will either confirm or reject
Right.
certain misconceptions, and that's, I think, for me, that's one of the reasons, is data is usually the best way to either, help to find a path.
Right, and I
to
would
better-
submit to you that data with context is probably the best, right? So,
Right.
more than, like I said, more than happy to provide the data. You know, we really are. We're trying to implement a bunch of new technology and processes and policies that help us tell our story, right?
Right.
So that's what I was saying. If there's an email that comes in, contact us. Let us know what you want. We'll help you say, hey, this is exactly what you request. These are our systems that we use that are going to show the story of what it is that you're looking for. You're welcome, always welcome to just ask for the data, right? You're always welcome to do that. But what we saw last month, right, is that you get a sliver of it because that's what's responsive to the small request, right? And that only shows a portion of it. So we didn't even get CATS data last time, right? We got Blue Team data, right? So that's what I'm saying. I wish that we had a magical system that we could plug all of this information into and pull all of the information out of, but unfortunately, I think we use about 57 different systems. And so it's a combination of all of those that that is going to be most responsive to actually what the goal is, not just what the request is, if that makes sense.
I can actually, moving forward, when we get to the end of canine, the town hall, and we will partner with you guys to figure out, okay, where do we want to have this, what do we want to cover, and seek your recommendations as to what this meeting needs to entail, to answer those questions that the community wants to hear.
Okay, so on Conveo, everybody got a chance to see it. This document was uploaded, I don't know, after the last meeting on the Conveo. We got 3 comments back on that over the month. And so I'll go through those now and we'll discuss those. First one is that it needs to be stated more clearly and directly that the potential for flight alone is not sufficient for a canine to be deployed. The policy here implies that the seriousness of the offense and potential danger are part of the decision, but it is quite vague and could cause the officer to be focused on flight or escape instead of the degree of danger. So, and that was on page 2 where serious offense was listed.
When, comment on page 6 though.
Right, there's 3 of them, so I was gonna go in
Oh, you're
order.
going to the next comment.
Yeah, so, and, I'll read all of them because they're all pretty related.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the second one, again, the term serious offense is much too broad. We can't include nonviolent offenses where the use of the canine force is unreasonable. Such a broad definition does not reflect the focus of this entity's human life, necessity, proportionality, and de-escalation as required by the stipulated judgment. And then, I agree with the ACLU recommendation that this definition be clarified to violent felony where a suspect is armed and poses immediate threat, deadly force, or serious injury. The current definition is not typically rooted in the penal code and can easily encompass non-violent felony offenses in situations where there is no threat of imminent danger, only flee. Does anybody need those reread before we talk about them? Okay. So, the definition that is kind of at point here is serious offense. Any in-progress felony offense, a crime of violence against an officer or the public, an offense where deadly weapons were used or are perceived to be possessed by the suspect. That's what we're defining as serious offenses in this policy. Ryan and I were actually talking about it earlier today, and we were bouncing around the idea of going with a little bit tighter with some of that verbiage, and specifically with this any in-progress felony offense, right? I think we'd all agree that a forgery does not need to have a dog bite, right, or result in a dog bite. And then as we were talking about it though, there are some of these situations where we don't know, and the officers don't know exactly what the situation is going to be, right? They get a little bit of information here, a little bit of information there, some observations, and they're having to make a decision to either prevent a further crime or apprehend somebody that they believe is responsible for the crime. Where we get some quality control on that is our case law, Graham versus Connor, Tennessee versus Garner, the use of force policy itself, right? If we had somebody that was biting or sending their dog to bite somebody writing a bad check at a bank, that's going to be picked up through the additional screening measures, right? That's not going to, if that happened, that person would no longer be a canine handler, and they would probably be looking at some significant discipline within the department. So I say that to say this. If we make it so restrictive that they can't be used, except for very, very small circumstances, then it's taking options off the table for when officers have to make that split-second decision. And now if they don't have a dog, is lethal force the next best option, right? What we want to avoid is, with this philosophy of de-escalation and force minimization, is every opportunity to not get to the end, right? We want it to be as minimal as possible. So again, philosophical opinions here. The more options that we have within that, theoretically, the better that decision can be. Disagreements?
Yes and no, because it also opens the door for lots of excuses, so it's
Sure.
very hard, very tricky.
Right, I agree. And that's where, again, we're working on policy right now, but there's a whole big train that comes after this, right? The training is huge. It's a huge component of all of these policies, of all of the things that we do down there. Probably just like y'all at your jobs, right? You have policies. The policy doesn't say exactly what to do in every circumstance, right? So you get trained. There's supervisors. Probably many of you are supervisors, right? And then there's a review practice after all of that to make sure that we still have a policy that's even relevant, like what we're doing right now. So, anyway, I felt in my review, and as Ryan and we're talking about it, as much as we certainly want to bring the feedback in and be responsive to the feedback that comes in, it's really difficult for us to justify taking an option off the table as opposed to just making sure that that option that's on the table is used correctly. Does that make sense?
I mean, right now, K-9 is the category, what is it, third? Stipulated judgment? Category 2. So, I mean, again, I guess I'm just thinking back as to like, in the last year, K-9 incidents, were they all justifiable? And was it because of the vagueness of the policy that, and again, I'm asking, I'm not saying that I know the answer, but that is where I'm curious to understand.
Right.
Of the past year, how many K-9 incidents occurred, and what was, I guess, the underlying factor of why we need to strengthen that policy or improve that training?
So there's a lot of ways we could go with that. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Absolutely. In most of these, there's room for improvement. We're not dealing though, with situations that we all get to sit around and talk about ahead of time. We're dealing with situations that young men, young women, young people are out there having to make a decision right then and there based off of their observations, right? And totality of the circumstances that they have available to them at that time. There's a lot that goes into that, like their experience, their readiness level, you know, their individual beliefs, their individual opinions, all that stuff, right? All of that goes into what it is that they're perceiving is the threat or is the reason or the stimulus for sending their dog, right? That's where, again, the training comes in, the supervision comes in. A lot of times the discipline comes in. Do we kick people out of the canine unit? Absolutely. We absolutely do. Do we hold people accountable through discipline, suspensions, written reprimands, things like that? Absolutely. So do we have a widespread issue with bad bites? I don't think so. I think that our review practice is stringent enough to where we catch that stuff. Does that mean that there's never a bad bite? No. You know, does that mean that there's not accidents like the one that we talked about last time? That kind of stuff happens. We work against it. You know, we work to combat it. We work to make sure that when a gap in our training is identified, something that we previously didn't see or we hadn't paid enough attention to, that it's addressed and that it's now addressed in training. Any other?
Do you know off the top of your head, like the most common incidents that you recall?
As far as,
I mean,
most common as far as what?
Or where a canine was released. What is, and is, again, appropriate, because like, going back to the language of like, I agree with you, like, I think we need to consider all of our options, but I also feel like canine is like an excessive use of force. I mean, some of the worst cases come to mind where like, you know, people are already on the ground or handcuffed and canines are released. That is extreme. I mean, and so.
I would agree.
And so I'm just curious as to, is it because of the way they interpret that vagueness of the policy, and is there a way we can, so I guess what I'm asking is, of the recent incidents, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, how many canine incidents do we have this year, and what were the top 2 reasons of why they were released?
I don't have that information. I don't know if you have that or.
This year, I don't know, I think we
Not
gave
off
it,
the top of my head.
yeah, we gave the apprehension versus engagements, like 52 engagements or something like that. I think it was
That
last
was
year,
last
though.
year.
I don't think it was beginning of this year.
Yeah.
I know we've had significantly less this year. We've also reduced the size of the canine unit slightly. But as far as like, I guess I'm not understanding what you mean by justification.
What
Like,
are the top 2 reasons?
are you talking about like
underlying
the crime that
offenses?
it's involved in?
Yeah,
Or
I
you
mean,
talking about
I think some of
what
the-
occurred, like?
Yeah, because I mean, I think the 3 comments that were just discussed right now, that, I think it goes back to like, if the vagueness of the language leads to like interpretation of like, well, you know, I was afraid he was gonna run and grab something. And, or, again, I don't have any recent incidents off the top of my head, but some of the ones that I recall in the last 5 years where people were already on the ground and canines were released. I'm assuming, I don't know if the policy has improved or changed since those incidents, but I'm curious as to like, well, you know, I was afraid that he had a gun in his pocket even though he was on the ground. So would it help to reduce those incidents or engagement with canine if we strengthen that policy, not completely saying that you should never use a canine or, you know, being considered as like, it is an excessive use of force weapon,
Right.
and not so much as like, oh, you know, again, going back to those 3 comments of where the concern is the vagueness of what is considered like, you know, an incident, a violent crime happening, or under the impression that is an crime
Well,
about to
one of the
occur.
issues that, well, first of all, one of the 3 comments basically says that the use of a canine should be deemed as deadly force, which it's not, and the courts have said that it is not, and we're not gonna change our policy to make it that. Why would I use a canine as a deadly force weapon against somebody who's trying to use deadly force against me or the public when I have more feasible options to take care of that problem instead of the canine? It's just off the table, we're not gonna do it. The other two comments in there that I have issue with
The
is,
claim that it's not used deadly force in courts is wrong, is false.
we've had multiple attorneys look at it and they said,
All right.
no, it's not
The
deadly
point is not to
force.
argue this. The decision was made, that that's not the way that we're gonna interpret it. Now, as far as, the other comments,
The other comments look like they were just based off the policy and this policy alone, right? The canine policy is not the only thing that makes rules for these officers and how they deploy the dogs and how they use force. We also have the use of force policy. We also have the law, right? Man versus Connor, 835, all these other things that govern what these officers have to do, and they have to take all those things into account. We could write the policy, the canine policy, to fit all those things. It would be 100 pages long, and so would all the other policies out there, so nobody would ever read it in the first place. We just have to direct it towards the things that specifically apply to the operation of that dog out there on the street.
and the oversight, or one of the oversight measures for that, is obviously our process, right? So we've got the review of the supervisors and all the WebPD captains and all that stuff. If the concern is that all of those people are missing that, then I think that the best remedy is just like you all do. Throw a public information request in there, you know what I mean, and hold us accountable. I personally don't think that there's inappropriateness that goes on with that, but if there is, that would be a way to uncover it. So it's, again, it's a process that we're all in, not just in this room, but even the community, right? So everybody doing the best that they can. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and that was, Rosa's comment, I think the negative aspects of the canine get indelibly marked in the community's brain, and that's where I think data can be very useful.
Right.
If this is such a small number, and we're taking as much time to, and we want to proceed through the policies, if we have, again, if we had data that said, okay, that situation happens, 1 in 1,000 times that the canines are deployed, that incident, so that doesn't represent a high number that we have to
Right.
develop a whole policy around one incident. And by no means am I'm just providing another perspective.
Yeah.
I think data takes the weight of, they're important, but it's not, it's indelible.
I know what you're saying. I understand it, and I think that you're absolutely right.
I'm trying to say here.
It's, unfortunately, the data is so spread out because we're tracking so many different things. And
Right.
a lot of those things are new, where we're trying to track things through a new process or new software or something like that. So, like I said, just ask. We're more than happy to provide the data. The transparency page actually provides a pretty good snapshot. It's fairly broad, but bite ratios, things like that are on there. So,
But I was thinking if we could kind of identify it around some of these issues that are coming out of these comments about the policy, that maybe that data would refine the perspective or the narrative.
now, as far as like definitions of serious offense and being too vague, I don't know that data is going to help with that. But like I said, it will always add context, right? So,
If I may, just to correct you,
Please.
the use of force dashboard does not have bite ratios. It's not that specific to canine, but it does have demographics, trends, and you can filter it and look only at canine engagements. But it's not gonna give you, bite ratio, but you can kind of do the math. You can look at the number of people involved and then the number of bites. But it's not just honed in on canines, because it's for the use force, all use force.
But you
Thank you.
can't calculate the bite ratio looking at how many use of force incidents there were globally, and then like how many of those were canine incidents, because a canine might be deployed, but
and
doesn't
that's
necessarily.
not the way we do it. We do
No.
it based off of deployments and then engagements.
Right, but that's not gonna be captured in the transparency page, because the transparency page has just all use of force incidents.
Yeah.
But it
So
has
yeah.
canine, it has, like, there's a section for type of force, and you can pin down on canine, you can drill down on canine.
And it says how many deployments there were versus how many bites.
We, in Blue Team, we only track, and that's where the data comes from, that's just engagements, that's just your bites.
Right, so, and then, and that's a kind of a broad swath on that page, but more than happy to release that data through Public Information Act requests.
I realize I joined the conversation a little bit, and I'm not
Right
sure.
at crunch time too, we're supposed to transition.
And I'm not sure where exactly the conversation is, but just based off of the comments on the recording and data and whatnot. I think I had shared previously that I had requested and obtained like 84 canine use of force reports that occurred in like a 27-month period from like January 2021
Right,
to like
the ones we talked
March
about last month, right?
2023, yeah. And, you know, just on the basis of like that review, there's like a number of things that are not consistently reported by officers or information that's missing that is really critical to be able to really ensure compliance with the canine policy.
Right.
And without that being consistently reported or reported at all, it's really
Well,
hard.
it's not that it's not consistently recorded at all. We talked about, you and I talked about a remedy
Well,
to
that was
that.
just one thing, but there's a number of things. Like, for example, I think the thing that I had raised with you last time was that the reports don't indicate who the investigator assigned to investigating that use of force incident was. And then also discussed that there were blank signature fields. But I think more than that, like, for example, there's a field that states whether the person was hospitalized, and in like over 90% of these, it said that the person was not hospitalized, did not receive any sort of medical care. But when you actually look at the
Those are
narrative.
two different things. And we're not saying that they didn't receive medical care, that they didn't go to the hospital, they weren't admitted to the hospital.
Sure, but when you look at the actual like narratives, it contradicts whatever the field that was clicked by.
Right.
Um,
Stephanie, please, what did we talk about last time though? Like,
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not
I
trying to
think-
make this a secret to anybody, and I did talk about it before you
We
came, so.
talked about a very brief thing, but I think that this is information that's
Not
important
about a very
for.
brief thing. We talked about, let me know what you want. I gave you my card. Email me what you want. I'm more than happy to say, hey,
Sure,
this
you know,
system,
but I
this
followed up
system,
with
that.
the clerk's office. You know, aside from that, I mean, I think that that sort of information, I understand, and, you know, I'm happy to follow up and get clarity on that, but I think that this is information that's important for my fellow CAP members to know and be aware of. You know, and I think that, like, aside from me just obtaining this data, I think that this is data that should be available to all CAP members, and I think it should be consistently reported on these, on the use of force canine, or the canine use of force reports, or additional fields need to be included to be captured so that we ensure that there's compliance with these policies. You know, other police departments capture other information that's not on here, and I'm happy to go like line by line. I have like a, you know, I've looked at a number of these. And so, yeah, I mean, I appreciate your offer to do follow-up, but I've been, you know, communicating with the city clerk's office and the clerk that is housed within BPD and for months, and haven't obtained like other data that I've requested.
Right.
But that's not my point. My point is that, like, you know, it says no medical, you know, it says no hospitalization or no hospital, but then the narrative actually indicates that the person was taken to the hospital, did sustain injuries, and so there's an inconsistency there. And then the narratives also sometimes don't consistently track whether or not what the injuries were, you know, what sort of medical care
Right.
was.
It's because we're looking at one slice of a responsive measure. This, Tabitha, is exactly what I was talking about data without context, right? We talked about this, and there are multiple systems that capture a lot of those different aspects.
If I
We can
may,
get-
so the hospitalization box, our procedure, the department's procedure is anytime somebody gets in a use of force, they more than likely go to the hospital for medical clearance. If we check that box, for anytime anybody went to the hospital for medical clearance, everyone involved in a use of force would register as going to the hospital. Now, we do check that box if they're admitted, or if they have a DOJ injury, or if they require sutures or stitches from like a canine engagement. We do not check that if they just go for medical clearance prior to booking.
Well, I don't know that that's necessarily true, because there's at least one incident that was reported to the DOJ for URSIS data in 2021, and the box said no. And then the narrative said that, you know, upon the officer's like just visual inspection of injuries, it seemed that the person just had some slight bruising, some bloody nose, but then it had like a very brief line at the bottom that said, oh, the doctor actually said that this person sustained broken ribs and like other bone fractures, and like it said, you know, report to DOJ.
So I cannot speak to data in 2021, I was not here, but I will tell you the data we have now is way more robust.
Right, and
So-
and the blue team stuff, which were the reports that we were looking at, have a summary from the supervisor, that's not the full report.
Yeah, I mean, I, just based off of these canine use of force reports, right, because again, I've like been, for months, been following up with the city clerk's office to obtain the other records that they've
Right.
indicated are responsive to my request. Based off of these, there are a number of other issues, and I mean, you know, like, we're talking about, in the revision of these policies, we're talking about, and what the stipulated judgment says, we're talking about like prohibiting, you know, the use of canines in crowd control, or prohibiting the use of canine for folks who are under, you know, underage, under 18, or appear to be under 18. Like, that sort of information is not captured in these canine use of force reports, and so it's really hard then to be able to like ensure compliance. You know, mental health, whether someone was in crisis or, you know, under the influence of some sort of like substance use,
Right.
that's not necessarily consistently recorded, and so I'm not saying, I guess what I'm trying to say
It's
is,
not reported in what you've reviewed. Did you request everything?
I mean, I did, and I just haven't
You
gotten it,
made
but,
a request,
I mean,
right?
I-
And I'm not here to argue.
Yeah,
Like
I
I said,
don't wanna argue.
CC me
I
on the
guess-
request, CC Ryan on the request.
I'm not trying to argue, I guess my point is just that, like, as we talk about policies and as we revise policies, I think that like another critical component, and it ties into what Tabitha was raising, I think, is that, you know, and what other members, sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot, like, and what other CAP members have sort of raised is that like we need data to ensure that the policies are being implemented in the way that they're intended, that they are actually complying with the
Right.
stipulated judgment. And without consistent data, it's really hard to do that. And so if we're really serious about changing these policies, if we're really serious about what we're doing here, then, you know, we shouldn't be sort of like hiding the ball. Like, that data should be available.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's playing hide football. I think that I've made it very clear that I'm more than happy to help you out. Made it clear last month, and we didn't even talk between then and now, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll follow up, but I think the picture is that like, there are things that we collectively can work on to ensure are recorded and captured in like your policy, in your use of force reports or other records, to ensure compliance. I think that's the larger.
On that, we absolutely agree. This is something where we all have to work together to do this, right? Yes, sir.
And again, as one of the lay people of this community, I honestly don't think we need that kind of data to do our primary function and get this policy changed to match what the DOJ has directed us to. I think we're getting in too deep and getting in, I don't want to call them weeds, but the details are going to prevent us from doing our job even if we know what we need to do. We're already 15 minutes past transition time, as you stated. I think
Appreciate that. And I want to say, and stop me if I'm misquoting or if I'm reading into too much. All the stuff that you're saying is absolutely essential to the functioning of the unit. Right now, we need to come up with a policy. Right? That is our task, is to come up with this policy. So I say that, like, more than happy to talk about it offline. We do have to transition over to the use of force so that you guys can get started on that one. But again, you have my contact information. I'm more than happy to work with you on it.
Sure, I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead. Kathy had it.
Well, I think for me, the data about medical stuff and other than that, just about canines. I can tell two stories of my own. Last year, how many people with complaints, young teenagers who were tased. One had a terrible experience. But I mean, that's not.
I've been tased too,
The
as
point
well.
the point is that somehow if we could have more awareness of, again, the stories we told about how, yes, sometimes this happens, but it shouldn't happen, and we're, you know, it's like, I mean, I don't know, I think that's part of why we're so frustrated, because some of us want, it's like we're not really talking just about numbers. We're talking about how do we make this so that people trust, you know, and believe that, yes, we're doing this, and that, I mean, because, yes, the word, so that's why I made my comment about a vague word, does, like I said, can also cause a problem.
Okay.
I don't know, I mean, I guess I'm trying to make a bridge between those who want quickly get it over with
Right.
and those who want the numbers, but I mean, both matter. And
Well,
I
we've
think
been
it's
talking
really
about
the-
this since May for April? I don't think anybody's trying to quickly get it
No,
over with.
what I meant was that we just focus on changing policy. I think underneath this is the real question of the community is,
Right,
how do we find a way that people trust BPD?
yeah, it's to work together, right?
So
It's not playing hide the football, and it's not playing gotcha. It's
Yeah,
working together to
I
get this stuff
understand
done.
that one of the critical parts of this group is to do policy revision. And I think one of the frustrating things in looking at what was not incorporated and what was alleged to be sort of already included in the language is that like a lot of the comments that, or a lot of the recommendations that people gave on this canine provision, or on this canine policy, clarify what the stipulated judgment says and really makes really clear what the roles and responsibilities of officers are when canines can be deployed off leash, limiting when those sorts of limitations. And that sort of stuff is not clear. I think that the latest draft that BPD circulated in October is still very vague. And I don't want to like belabor this anymore. I realize that folks want to move on to other things, and I understand that like it's important to like continue a flow, but these are really important things, and this really impacts our community members, and like we're here for a reason. I mean, BPD and PCSO both, I know it's PCSO is a separate entity or whatever, but like both have a really long history of like really terrible use of force and as an institution. And so I think it would be, I understand the wanting to and the urgency to sort of like just move on, but like not at the cost of like the constitutional rights of this and safeguarding the rights of like our community members. Does that
Right.
make sense? Like
Oh, that makes a
these
lot of
are
sense.
really
There's not one
important
person
issues.
here that thinks that we need to trample on the rights of community members or Constitution or anything like that. I'm making it very clear to you that this is working together, right? It's good that you don't agree with me all the time. It's good that I don't agree with Ryan all the time, right? Because that's what's gonna get us the best cross-section of policy and ultimately training and supervision and all that stuff, right? But I'm making it very clear, and you seem to keep arguing this other point. We're open. We're open. Come tell us what you want. Come on a ride along, right? Come to canine training. More than happy to show it to you. It's not, nobody's hiding any footballs. So, okay. With that transition.
I apologize for being late, but that's the nature of traffic in LA. So I'm glad I made it back when I did. Okay, so thank you for your work on the canine policy. It's been a lot. It's been extended over a period of months, and I appreciate the patience that you guys have shown us in trying to figure out how to do this work. And I know we haven't figured that out yet, but technology solutions and being able to communicate with each other, we really want to improve that process, and I think you're going to see some improvement here very soon. So where we are with the canine policy, we've had that dialogue and discussion, which is, again, what the Community Advisory Panel's role is to give us input on your policies. We've had extended discussions on this on several different times, and we want to make them meaningful. It sounds like you guys were having some of that. We want to hear your perspective. We want to hear the community's perspective. And we're going to make decisions on that. We won't always agree, as we've talked about before. And we're going to make some decisions that are in the best interest of the entirety of the organization and how consistent with law and all of those things, obviously, but also consistent with the values that we hold and the values of our community. So our community is important. And I reiterate this not because they're talking points or rhetoric. I'm reiterating it because I'm wanting to assure you that, as Captain King was talking about, we want this to be a transparent process. We want this to be an engaging process. We're not going to always agree on things, and in fact, sometimes we will on more than you think. But there are also systems within which we are working that we try to make the best policy to give the most direction that we can to officers who are out in the field, who are working in very uncertain environments. And we can't always be very linear with things. And so, but we have to have guidelines, we have to have guardrails, and we want to have good systems, similar to inclusive of all of those things you guys talked about. So, where we are with canine policy, we're going to do a final revision. I don't know what exactly the conversations were tonight, but we'll incorporate and we'll finalize it. The policy will go to Jensen Hughes, the monitor, and then forwarded to DOJ for approval. Then it comes back to us, and then we proceed with all the different implementation and training and things like that. Policy is not something that's one and done. There's always conversations about it, from law, from incidents, from best practices that are developed, from technology, a variety of things. And so policy is always changing. We want to transition now tonight to the presentation on use of force. Again, this is meant to be just an educational conversation around use of force issues. And so I would encourage you to come with an open mind, judge for yourself the information, and then make decisions whether or not you think it's credible, whether you think it's valuable to your work as a CAP to give us input on our use of force policy. So with that, wait more. Do we need to take a break? You guys been out for a bit?
Yeah, a little bit.
The chief mentioned it earlier, but we wanted to be very responsive to the previous concerns or previous requests that were brought up about bringing in someone from the outside of BPD, so to speak. That's a recognized subject matter expert in the industry. There are many, and I want to be very, very upfront too, and I recognize that there are also maybe some differences of opinion in terms of even force science, which is where Vaughn Clean who he represents and what he'll be speaking from that perspective tonight. So feel free, again, to raise questions. I would only ask that you keep an open mind, like the chief said. We will, to give you kind of a preface again of where we're going to be going for next month, tonight's setting will be just kind of more of a broader industry perspective from, again, force science. Take that for what you can and use it as you see fit as it relates to the purpose of the entire CAP. And then next month, we will have our specific, more policy-specific conversations that will be predominantly led by Sergeant John Bishop of our use of force team. So again, with that being said, we'll dive into those deeper conversations along the way. Do you have a question, Maurice?
I just want to say, can we hold questions until the very end? Just write down your questions and ask them at the end, so we can move on.
And that's probably a really great point. We did set aside time. Vaughn does have some time set aside so that we will have some Q&A time directly for him. So we'll try and get through his slides and then do the Q&A. Sounds good. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Vaughn.
I was going to say the opposite. I was like, beat me up with questions, please.
But I understand.
So I got to play my cool slide because I had a friend of mine, Tara, make that fight. Again, that's about as far as my technique goes right there. First of all, yeah, I work for Force Science. I'm the CEO and the director of the consulting division, which means we're involved in almost every high-profile police shooting in the country. But I'm not just here in my Force Science capacity. That's just one hat. I get qualified as an expert witness in police use of force, threat assessments, decision-making. I review video camera, and we're going to talk a lot about video at the end. Do not let me get past that, because we have brand new research out there you guys will be shocked at. It will change the industry on how we view body cams, and I want you guys to see that. You'll probably be some of the first to see that. I was a police officer for about 10 years full-time before I went to law school. I was working narcotics at night. I went to law school during the daytime. After 9/11, I joined the military as an attorney. I was as I was a police officer, I was a defense tactics instructor. I worked on our SWAT team. I ran our de-escalation program. I was a respite care worker, a hospice worker. I taught persuasion communications, and I was a crisis counselor. I did all that because I loved our community. I did that before I was a cop, and I did it after I was a cop. I am not from a perfect family. I've got brothers who have served time in federal prison. I've got brothers who are in and out of jail for DUIs. I've got drug-addicted brothers. I'm waving at you right now. You know who you are. And I got another brother who's a cop. My son's a cop. My other sons are just graduated from college. They're working in banks and doing great things. I've got 6 kids total. Love them all, and they're all equally challenging in different ways. So I have a pretty broad background. After I was in the military, I was a police legal advisor. I was training cops, military police, civilian police. I was a police legal advisor for 5 different chiefs of police. I was a prosecutor. I was a senior prosecutor. I was a special assistant U.S. attorney focusing on sexual assault investigations, prosecution, and training. I ended up at the Pentagon, and I wrote DOD and use of force policy for DOD and the U.S. Army at international and national levels. When I got out of the military, retired out of the military, and keep this in mind, the entire time I kept working as a cop. So while I was working as an attorney, I kept working as a cop. I'm gonna share a story with you that I think is pretty cool. One morning I wake up and I put on my Army PT gear, right? I go running with my unit. I go back to my office in my Army greens, right? And I got to work at my office, at the federal prosecutor's office, as a military guy. Then I had to go to federal court and try, I was doing a hearing that day. So I go to federal court, same day, put on my suit, I go into federal court, I finish my hearing, it was a murder case, or attempted murder case. I get done, I walk down, I walk across the street, I go down to the locker room of the police department, and I put on my police uniform, and I go work the street that night. That was one day, and I thought, I haven't found anybody else who's done that. I get to claim that as a cool day. So this is me, this is what I've done. When I retired, I worked for Lexipol. You guys know Lexipol, it's a senior, it's a public safety policy writing for EMS, fire, civil governance. I was a senior policy attorney, which gave me an opportunity to look at the country and how use of force. I was there during the progressive police reform effort. I was there watching our country debating and protesting and rioting and discussing what needed to happen with the police, right? As we were looking at these high-profile cases. This was before I was with Force Science. And in that capacity, I got to see traditional law and order interests, which we're going to talk about, come into contest with progressive reform efforts and how those things were going to change policing, right? And what those challenges were is what we're going to spend some time talking about. You guys are at the intersection of progressive police reform and traditional law and order interests. You guys are having the discussion of how do you meld those two things, and it's an incredibly important discussion to have. But there's limits to what you guys can do. There's limits to how much you can incorporate some of the reform ideas. And we're going to talk about what some of those limits are, as we've seen them across the country, what the tension points are. Because I want you to understand the challenge of what you're trying to do. And it's not that you can't have a changing culture. We've seen a need for that changing culture. I started in 1993, and I was the last commissioned officer in 2018. I saw a lot of change. I saw police who had a culture, and this is my understanding of the police culture. It's one of selfless service and duty and courage and running to the sound of gunfire. It's constant, never-ending improvement. It's working interdisciplinary with the social workers, with the fire department, with EMS, with the power line workers. There is a culture of integrating the police with other specialties, and the police never push back against that. And so as you guys understand, part of this discussion was, how do you integrate social workers with police? How do you work psychologists with police? And the police, as I saw it across the country, were like, if you have a solution to bring it to us. We are used to working with experts. When we talk about de-escalation, I'm going to tell you what project I got to be part of, which was when the push came to say, you got to incorporate the psychologists, you got to incorporate the social workers, you got to get the best practices in de-escalation, you got to get them into policing. Well, here's the punchline. My job was to study that. There's beta reports, the best practices for the emergency treatment of agitation. So my job, before Force Science, was to dig into the best practices of the emergency treatment of agitation, de-escalation training. And you know, the first thing I found out was when they built those programs to find best practices, who did they rely on to identify best practices? The police. When there's violence in the emergency facilities, who do they call? They either stick them with a needle, and the police have to hold them down to do that, or they restrain them. But they wanted to move away from pharmacology, they wanted to move away from drugs and figure out, is there a way we can generate voluntary compliance, de-escalate, and persuade without using needles? And so they came up with the beta report, so I stole from that certain lessons that if the communities and the reform activists were saying, we need change and we need you to rely on the experts, I said, great, what are the experts saying, what are they doing that we're not doing so we can incorporate it? And there were some really important lessons that came out of that. And when we talk about de-escalation, we'll show you what those were and how they benefited police and how they fall right into the category of what some of our limitations on integrated reform ideas with traditional law. So this is me. I want to put that out there because yes, I represent Force Science. I'm the CEO of Force Science. I'm the director of the consulting division. But what I'm going to talk about today goes so far beyond what I do at Force Science. It's going to be police practices. It's going to be law. I clearly I've tried to set myself up as one of the top experts in the country in the legal application, the legal requirements of policing. I taught constitutional policing for decades at this point. And that terminology, as many of you know, as constitutional policing, has sort of shifted. on what that means now, but we're having that conversation as well. And part of that conversation of constitutional policing is what we're gonna talk about here today in use of force. Because constitutional policing, I heard somebody say something, we wanna make sure it's constitutional, I think that was you, ma'am. Many of what you're hearing, much of what you're hearing today, these reform ideas are not constitutionally based at all. They're policy based. They're social experiments, they're theoretical, but we want to implement and want to see what we can do. We want to see if we can generate improvement. That's how that works. They're not born out of the Constitution. And I'll make it clear where it is, but I'm also going to make it very clear where it's not, because that's one of the big tension points. You got people saying we want to elevate beyond the constitutional limits, right? We want to be greater than that. PERF, Police Executive Research Forum, you might be familiar with them, says we want to elevate the police standard beyond that of the Constitution. That becomes really important because traditional law and order has been trained up against constitutional standards. And now we're trying to elevate that. And we're going to elevate it where we can, where it doesn't violate two basic rules. All right, so this is our mission. I like Force Science's mission. I might have written it. What's important about this is built into our mission statement was the concept of honest accountability. We are committed to accountability. In every place we go, we hold officers accountable. They don't know much about Force Science. It's not about Force Science. But I would tell you this, what is little known is we take cases from prosecution, we take it from defense, civil, criminal. We have lots of cops who there's nothing we can do to help them. There are plenty of cops we cannot help defend. And we don't. We're on a very high profile case. You guys probably has heard there's a bunch of cops out in Memphis that are pleading guilty. There's not every cop that we're gonna come in and go, we'll defend every cop. I heard recently from somebody that there's not a cop at Force Science that's willing to defend. And I was like, then you don't come to my office. Because I'm in charge of that division. And there are a lot of cops out there who are messing up. And we have nothing to say to help them. But what we do, we say, go ahead, retain me, let me evaluate your case, and then we're gonna help you plead guilty. And we're gonna help you settle your case. Because you don't have anything in here that's gonna justify what you did. Most people don't know that because when you see me testify, when you see any of us testify, it's because what we have to say is helpful to our clients. If what we tell our client is you need to plead guilty, if what we tell our client is there's nothing in there that a human performance is gonna explain, they do not put us on the stand. And so people are like, every time you testify, you're testifying on behalf of cops. We also testify on a lot of civilian cases, gang member cases. I recently had a case where the gang members it was a robbery. It was a robbery where a guy got killed. They brought us in, they said we need to evaluate this case. And I looked at the case and I'm like, yeah, this guy is selling dope. This guy is trying to rob this guy that he's buying dope from, but this guy did not murder that guy. My job was to defend a gang member, drug dealer, who was committing a robbery, but he did not commit the murder. And every piece of evidence they had before they came to us, including his confession, pointed to the fact that he committed this murder. And my position was, no, that's a false confession. And I have prosecuted plenty of cases where these issues are litigated, so I can see the issues related to that case. And when I came in, I said, yes, he confessed, but the forensic evidence is inconsistent with his ability to do what he claims he did. And so my position is, this is a false confession. Now, he was found guilty of things he was supposed to be found guilty of, but he was not found guilty of a murder. So Force Science is involved in all of this, under my division, under my watch. We'll get back to that, but this is who we are, and I say honest accountability. We're gonna talk about honest accountability because, I will define that term, because everyone keeps talking about holding officers accountable. I say, fine, but we're not gonna allow officers to be unjustly held accountable or corruptly held accountable. We will fight for honest accountability, and I'll tell you what that means. Because we have plenty of people out there who are using the concept of accountability to push corrupt agendas. Meaning the officers did nothing wrong under any stretch of the law, but we're gonna put them in court anyway, and we're gonna put them in prison if we can. That is not honest accountability. Now, we don't lose those cases, thankfully, but we have officers who are sitting in prisons, jails, sometimes for 2 years, before it finally gets to a jury who come back in an hour, once they actually apply the law. So we're seeing that stuff. And if anybody thinks Force Science isn't gonna stand up and fight for those cases, we will absolutely fight for those cases. And if it's your idea to hold an officer accountable means that they used force and they must go to prison, that's not how it works. That's not accountability. We wanna make sure, under a procedural justice lens, will talk about, that there's a standard by which we can hold them accountable. They know what that standard is. We communicated it, we trained against it, and then we held them accountable to it. Not, we're gonna change the standard midway and hold them accountable to this new standard. And we're seeing some of that. So we want you guys to recognize those issues and to avoid them where you can, to see yourself in those problems and say, this is what he's talking about. We can't actually do that for the reasons that we're gonna talk about today. But there's plenty of stuff we can do. So we're gonna talk about perspectives on use of force, what cops know. It matters because, as everyone knows, use of force has to be viewed through the lens of a reasonable officer, knowing what that officer knew or perceived in that moment. And there's actually a court case that says the community's opinion of it is irrelevant when it comes to constitutional assessments. Now, we can elevate it, and we can put community standards in the analysis so long as we share that with the cops, which is what this is doing. You guys are trying to feed into a policy that can then feed into training. So if the community's voice wants to be heard in policy to elevate it beyond constitutional standards, this is where that happens. But the next step for this, once it's in the policy, is it has to make its way into the training. We're talking about federal legal foundations because that's the constitutional standard. We'll talk about human performance issues just very quickly, stuff I think most people walk away and go, I had no idea about that. That changed, some of the stuff I included here will change the way you look at policing. Talk about de-escalation. I probably get to be one of the top experts on de-escalation in the country. In fact, California quoted me in their California de-escalation manual. The feds quoted me in their de-escalation manual. I had no idea. Somebody told me, hey, did you know you got quoted? I go, nope, no idea. But it was pretty cool, so I put the quote in. All right. As we get to these other issues, escalation of force, officer created jeopardy, these are hot topics across the country. They're very, very contentious. And we can talk about them if we have time, and I think we should talk about them if we have time, but we cannot leave here until we get to that last one. Even if I have to change the order, you need to stay until we get through understanding video limitations. Because I will tell you this, videos are liars. You cannot rely on a body cam video to tell you what an officer knew, perceived, saw, understood. You cannot do it. And we convince judges of that, and I want to help convince you of that. And we have new research that is unassailable and will help us do that. All right, so I gotta ask you this. If you like this painting, raise your hand. If you don't, you don't have to raise your hand. But here's the question, you like it? No, good, you're in good taste. I don't know about this, but here's the thing, we have a feeling about this painting, we're looking at it, I don't know if my daughter did this, it's sitting on my refrigerator at home, or if this is a valuable painting. If you don't like this painting, that's fine. If you do like it, I'd say, well, great, but is it an award-winning painting? Is it a valuable painting? Is it something my daughter did? Is it something somebody sold for millions of dollars? And the answer is, as you can probably guess, my daughter did not draw this. This is a $137 million painting that nobody raised their hand that they liked but one person, because she was going to sell it. She's like, I like it. I'll sell it. This is police use of force. We don't know anything about painting. We don't know if it's the right genre. We don't know if it's going to win an award. We don't know anything about threat assessments or responses or the reality of action and reaction. We don't know anything about that because we don't fight for a living. We're not in the UFC. We don't shoot. We don't know how permanent getting shot with a bullet and how much it hurts is. We don't know that stuff, but we have a feeling when we see it, right? That's what this painting is. When we look at use of force, the question the feds ask is, was it reasonable? That's the standard. Was it reasonable? That's a pretty vague term, and I'm gonna tell you we don't like vague terms. But that's a vague term. The reason reasonableness works is because there's so many court cases that surround the concept of reasonableness and use of force that it sort of crystallizes the contours of the concept. And then we say, was it clearly established? Did we train cops on what we do know about reasonable and unreasonable? There's a lot of vague terms that has just not happened yet. It has not matured through the system. There hasn't been enough court cases. There's a lot of terms being used now surrounding what the police use of force must be or should be or we want it to be that have been untested and undefined. That's a problem. That's a challenge. Because we want to incorporate these new concepts into police use of force policy. And let me tell you the punchline, your policy incorporates almost all of them. And you're very unique in California that way. I will tell you across the country, you guys are incorporating new policy mandatory. And you know it's new. There was a lot of debate about it. You guys are incorporating in California new language that officers now have to try to understand and apply by statute and now by policy. This is not new to you. But what I want you to know is It's not consistent across the country. A lot of places are like, no way are we doing that. And I'll tell you why. Is this reasonable? Is this ever reasonable? Sometimes you gotta look at a use of force and go, well, reasonable people could disagree. Sometimes you look at something and you go, no, that's not okay. How many of you look at this and have a feeling about this? How many of you think this is okay? Right? Now typically, I did this in college recently. A lot of people are like, this is never okay. Right? And I said, yeah, that's right, this isn't okay. This is a female police officer who got beaten to near death in a correctional facility. And I look because a lot of cops are thinking, when they look at this, they go, well, you don't know what she did. I don't know if it's okay or not. What did she do? Because they're thinking she's the suspect, right? And a lot of our other students or our community members look at it and go, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's the problem. That's what cops are doing to our community members, and we have a feeling. Now, when we analyze police cases, we don't get to do that. We have to pull everybody into the deep water. It's very, very nuanced. We have to know, what did they do? We have to know the size disparity. What are their weapons involved? What information was available? What was reasonably believed? What was the underlying severity of the offense, right? The things you guys were talking about with the canine stuff. I thought that was an interesting conversation. A lot of those questions we were asking and answering decades ago that you guys are now getting to wrestle with. And so it was interesting to sit back and listen to that and to hear some of the comments that were being made relative to the canine policy. This is one of the first videos I saw when I was a brand new baby policeman. Actually, not baby policeman. Yeah, 1992. So my first real job as a cop was 1993. And this is one of the things they showed us in training. Now, what we're segueing here to is use of force requires you to see it through the lens of a cop. That means you have to understand the training, the education, and the experiences of police and reasonable inferences drawn therefrom. Now I'm gonna tell you this, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna watch a lot of videos, some videos of people trying to hurt police. And I'll tell you, we don't teach these classes and have people, people come up all of a sudden they're hyper vigilant. We're trying to explain to them, everybody's out to kill you. Real life mitigates that for us. Cops are out there stopping people all the time who are not trying to kill them. They're not that emotionally immature. We show a video to sensitize people to the potential threats they're facing so that they can engage in tactics to avoid having to use force. But if you don't understand how fast someone can attack you, you are not going to create the distance you need. You're going to think you can outdraw somebody and you cannot. And so when we look at the potential levels of threat, we understand that we're going to send cops out there, and if somebody on this video shoots a cop on a traffic stop and kills that cop, we're not expecting this cop to get out there on the next traffic stop and start drawing down on people. Because that cop is stopping hundreds of people who are not trying to kill them. But you will see stuff today that will be disturbing, it's graphic, and it's real. This was one of the first ones. What I want you to notice about this, what cops know, is that the bad guy who tries to murder you isn't going to telegraph it. They're going to be super nice sometimes. We often hear criticisms of the police, well, that guy's being nice, he's not being disrespectful, that guy, he has a job, he's dressed nice. And we hear people criticizing police conduct, and they're doing it from this really weird place of stereotyping. That people who are wearing a Taco Bell t-shirt and just got off work aren't going to try to kill you. Cops know better than that. People like this guy who are super nice during this entire traffic stop, you would be a fool to think he would want to kill you.
Just take a quick check real quick. You ain't home right now? Okay. I just want to take a quick look. Give me 3 goes. I just want to take a quick check. You don't have any alcohol on you, do you? Okay. That's fine. I'm going to take it just a minute. Have a lot of problems with guns and stuff up down there today. And alcohol and stuff. Let's see what that was like. Just stand back here. Hey, let me just put this clip
He won the fight. This guy ambushes him, tries to murder him. He kicks, he fights, he does everything he was trained to do. He creates space, he gets his gun out, he puts 5 rounds on this guy. He gets up and calls it in like he's supposed to, and while he's calling it in, the guy one more time goes boom, goes up under his armpit, into his heart. He walks around in front of the car, he dies. This is what cops know. This is why we develop tactics and certain mindsets that tell us, I don't know who you are. I cannot look at you and judge who you are based on how nice you're talking to me or how you're dressed. And so we engage in what are called tactical protocols. We do certain things every time because I don't know who you are. You'll hear somebody say, man, do me a favor, can you put your hand on the steering wheel for me just while I'm out here for your safety of mine? And it's like, don't disrespect me and treat me like a criminal. I'm like, it's trade-offs, it's cost benefits and trade-offs for that cop, because if he does that, it's a little bit safer. But now he risks offending somebody, so we try to do it nicely. And it's a challenge, because we gotta give cops some tools to be able to control the scene of investigations. The Supreme Court told us cops must maintain unquestioned command at the scene of investigations. That's a California case. How many cops know that? The Supreme Court said you must maintain unquestioned command at the scene of investigations. People are safer when the police maintain unquestioned command at the scene, and they do not let people freely come and go from the scene of their investigations. How many times I've heard police not even know they have that authority? Because to tell another human who is innocent what to do is tough. Now, why do we get to tell innocent people what to do? Because we don't know they're innocent. That's what an investigation is. But why it's so tough is because they know they are. So we're giving commands to somebody who knows they didn't do anything wrong, and they don't realize we can legally do that. And so that's a challenge. I want you to look at this guy.
How's it going? Can you turn off the scooter for me?
And listen to what he's saying. This is what cops know.
Put the kicks down for a minute. Down for me. Okay. And don't grab anything right there. Come here. Turn around real quick. Your leash hands on your head. You're not under arrest or anything, but you have a knife on you. I'm gonna take that out. Don't touch it. Your leash hands on your head for me. Turn around. Face away from me. Thank you. You're not under arrest or anything. Do you have any other weapons on you, bro? No, I'm trying to show you, sir. Well, tell me. Don't show me. No. Dude.
Can you all hear that? I've got asthma, sir. I can't breathe.
All right, well then breathe, bro. Take a deep breath. I need my air. Hey, dude. Talking, please, officer. Dude. I know, I'm not trying to do no, sir. I'm just trying to get you to get air out of me. I'm gonna be out with a scooter at Marion Circle on Mountain, just east. Can someone come, 82 east? Has you know this car, sir? No. Hey, dude. Hey, dude. Be cool, dude.
This guy's being nice. He's saying, sir. He's telling him he can't breathe. He's hurt. He didn't hear the gun hit the ground because he's running away. No, this is like no harm, no foul. The guy was playing a game. These are feigning injuries. These are tactical protocols by bad guys. He knows what he's doing. Now, how do we know that? Let's watch this next one. See if this guy is doing the same tactics. This is a stolen motorcycle.
Hands up. Get your hands up. Hands up! This is how I control you. Hands on your back. Lean forward. Lean forward. Get your hands on your head now. Not you. Not you. Well, you better figure it out. Because there's about 600 officers coming right now to put you on the ground.
Cops know people, that's the same guy, by the way. Both those videos were the same guy. The guy in the orange tank top that took off running and the guy on the motorcycle was the same guy. This is a technique, it's a tactic, cops know this. But we don't think everybody who says, "Oh, I can't breathe," or "ouch, that hurts," is faking it. Our tactical SOP is, if you say you can't breathe, let's get an ambulance en route. But don't think for a second that we're supposed to be like, "Oh, he's just hurting and he can't breathe." Cops know better than that, and so we have to engage in tactics that reflect the reality of what we know about suspect SOPs. And we don't expect you guys to know this stuff, which is why I try to introduce you to what cops know. Cops, we hear stuff about, why do cops, when I get close to somebody, why am I all of a sudden moving pretty quickly and moving with a sense of purpose? It's like, that's unnecessary, you don't need to do that. We do not want cops getting within arm's length of people while we're trying to make an arrest or control them, because not everybody has a knife, not everybody has a gun, but everybody has teeth. And we start thinking about, I had a prosecutor try to tell me, it's just teeth, it's just a bite, that's not deadly force, that's not serious bodily injury. And I go, fair enough. But let's talk about the reality of what teeth can do. And people in this room, I know, are familiar with somebody who's had the back of his head bit. I don't know who that is, but he's in this room right now. Yeah. My brother's missing part of his finger. He's a corrections officer at the time. He got his finger bit off. And so what I started doing when the guy tried to bite us, big grown man, the prosecutor wouldn't charge him with aggravated assault LEO, and I go, okay. So I started sending her photos. So this is what happens when you get bit by a human. This is what happens when you get bit by a human. This is what happens when you get bit by a human. This is what happens when you get bit by a human. Common household items. Cops are like, hey, do me a favor, don't step in the kitchen for a second. Hey, step away from the screwdriver for a second. Put that beer can down. And like, this is unnecessary. Put the cigarette down for me just while we're talking. Because what cops know is people get burned and screwdrivers end up in your head with people who want to put them there. It doesn't mean we draw down everybody standing next to a screwdriver. What it means is cops have a legitimate government interest and a legitimate law enforcement purpose for giving you the command to, sir, while we're out here for a second, can I just have you step away from the screwdriver? I'm like, it's just a screwdriver. Yep. It's just scissors. People who are nice, they're calm. They're not escalated. We keep having, the officer engaged in deadly force, he could have just de-escalated. Well, tell me how escalated this guy appears to you. This guy's not escalated. People try to kill you who aren't particularly agitated.
Are you scared? Hey, look, run in the back of the house. All right. What? I run a lot. Okay? On the side, girl, here, hold on. Look, we're gonna walk back, okay? Okay? Now, the thing of it is, you're still not in trouble, but obviously I can't trust you not to run anywhere. All right? So, come on. Come on. I'm gonna put your handcuffs in now. Okay?
Hey, the officer just got stabbed in the neck. Last thing before we move to the less emotionally intense stuff. Cops know when you shoot somebody, they don't always die right away. Cops know that there's a thing called wound effects that have to take place. You have to lose a lot of blood, lose consciousness, and stop fighting. Or we gotta blow up your structure so that you drop. Or we gotta take out the CNS so that you just can't think anymore. Something has to happen, and if you're facing a threat of death or serious bodily injury, cops are allowed to use a quality of force to immediately and decisively stop the threat. Immediately, decisively. Not try lower levels of force and hope for the best. If someone's trying to kill you, you get to use a quality of force legally that will immediately, decisively stop the threat. Understanding what cops know, which is even a gun isn't necessarily going to immediately, decisively stop the threat. This is why we have multiple gunshots. This is why cops are held to the standard of stop shooting when it becomes obvious that the person is no longer a threat. He's dropped the knife at this point. These officers are going to have to transition. But now he's an unarmed person. So can he be a threat of death or serious bodily injury? left the shooting out of this part, but that his back officer shoots him. This is what cops know. This is why when we talk about action and reaction and distance studies, distance doesn't mean much to me. What I want to know is based on how fast you can get to me and assault me and attack me, what are my options to stop you? Knowing full well stuff like this, knowing the reality of my response to your threat might not be immediately and decisive. So every threat assessment is an educated guess. Every threat assessment is an educated guess based on training, education, experience, and reasonable inferences. Then most of you probably don't have those experiences yet. And so we do stuff like this, so that when you're evaluating the reality of police use of force and the policies that are going to control that force, you start to think, I had no idea. Because we have this thing called the Cynefin framework, which you guys might love, where we look at operating and decision-making environments, and we say, some environments are clear, 1 + 1 = 2, and everybody knows it. We all see the problem, we all see the solution. Then we have complicated, which is we all see the problem, but you need expertise to find the solution, right? You need your IKEA manual. You got this big pile of boards, and I go, okay, but I need a manual, I need an expert. We know what the problem is, I need an expert for the solution. Then we have where cops live most of the time, which is complex. We don't even know what the problem is. We don't know how dangerous this person is. How am I supposed to use a minimum amount of force if I don't know how strong he is, what his skill set is, how intense he's going to fight me, what the severity of the offense that I know and the one I don't know? Like, cops have to live, and the chief just said it, there is a level of uncertainty and unpredictability out on the street that you have to be out on the street to understand. Go on the ride-alongs and you'll get closer to it. But if you're not out there and seeing how fast these assaults occur and feeling how fast it occurs, if you're not getting in the simulator and seeing how you're not winning those gunfights, you're not even close to what a cop has to live with, the decisions they have to make. And you guys are setting policy to guide the left and right limits of those decisions and the options and the tools they're allowed to take into these fights that are unpredictable and uncertain. It's a heavy, heavy thing you guys are doing right now, to try to incorporate all these reform language into these policies where cops were trained up against traditional law and order interests, and where cops are out there dealing with the reality of threats and the limitations of their responses, and you guys are coming in and going, we have something to say about how you do it. Fair enough, you're the community, you absolutely have something to say. You have an opinion, and now the goal is to make sure that it's as educated as it can be. Because the cops who are facing it, they don't get to live in a world where it's clear decision making. It's always complex. Complex means they have to probe, they got to spend time there with somebody to figure out who you are, what your motives are. Are you here trying to hurt me, or are you here just having a bad day? We pretend when someone says it's a mental health call that we know something about that. That means nothing to a cop. This person's suffering from mental illness. What on earth is a cop supposed to take from that with the DSM-5 being that thick? What does it mean to be suffering from a mental illness? Do I talk faster, slower? Do I stand further? Do I stand closer? Do I shut my lights off? Do I be more direct, less direct? No one's going to be able to answer that question, and yet we try to put a template on top of these calls called mental illness calls. I was a crisis counselor. I work with a lot of psychologists. We do a lot of training in this area, and I'm telling you, the level of unpredictability and uncertainty in dealing with that population is incredible. And the people who will tell you that are the professionals who work with that population all the time. And we're asking cops, we're trying to template their response. I was in a deposition recently, and they said, you read the policy, aren't the officers supposed to do these 10 things when they're dealing with somebody who's in mental health crisis? I'm like, I don't know. What's the crisis? Was he diagnosed? Who diagnosed him? Because I can tell you, sometimes you're supposed to get close to somebody and talk softly, maybe touch them and be reassuring. Other times when you do that, they're going to try to stab you. You do not know who this person is. There is not a template response. It's very complex. When we talk about honest accountability, I use that term because these are some of our clients. We're talking about community trust. We're talking about procedural justice. We're talking about the police now developing policies that is not going to destroy community trust. Because the community demands that when you recruit, hire, train, supervise these police officers and you ask them to go out into very dangerous places to work, that we don't then turn around and hold them accountable to standards that are beyond human performance. We don't hold them to accountable to unjust and corrupt accountability. This large community is not going to let officers be held corruptly or unjustly accountable. They're not gonna allow standards to be put on top of officers that are beyond human performance capabilities. So you've heard me say honest accountability. The community isn't gonna stand for betraying these officers who they put out there. When we talk about this concept of traditional law and order interest, here's why this is important. Before the progressive police reform issue got so much momentum, officers were operating under what are called traditional law and order interests. That's officer safety, public safety, suspect safety, property protection, identity of crimes, catching bad guys, efficient administration of justice, serving warrants, traditional law and order interests. Progressive police reform has different outcomes, different metrics for success. Would in one word, what could we say is the driving force behind progressive police reform?
Safe communities and accountability.
What was the first one?
Safe communities and accountability.
Okay. Where does equity fall into that? Equitable policing. And accountability is great. That's absolutely committed. The concept of progressive reform efforts hinges on this concept of equity. It hinges on the idea that if equal treatment of people results in unequal outcomes, we don't even want equal treatment. Because a disparity in treatment is bad, disparity in outcomes is equally bad. And our progressive reform efforts are really across the country being aimed at this concept of equity, of ensuring that your percentage within the census-based population, whatever your race-based percentage is, that's the percentage the metric by which we're gonna judge the police's performance against that particular identity group, right? So we look at like 13% population, and we look at what's your percentage in the prisons, right? And if your percentage is higher.
Can you repeat that or rephrase that? I'm not
Sure.
getting it.
What DOJ is looking at is if you're only 13% of the population or 6% of the population, you should not be represented higher than that in a prison population. It should be 6%. If it's not, that's not equitable. That's an unequal outcome, right? That can happen because of unequal treatment. That can happen because of disparate impacts, meaning I treat you the same, but because of your circumstances, you're gonna have harsher consequences, right? Based on education, criminal history, social structure, family structure, all those things, right? Equity, this concept of equal outcomes, is new. It's not a traditional law and order interest. They basically look at you as an individual, look at your conduct, and I react to your conduct. Progressive police reform is aimed at achieving equity, this equality of outcome across all aspects of the criminal justice system. And not just criminal justice, we know medical, we know banking, we know financial, we know criminal justice. What's that?
Is it undue and racist systems that exist here?
You said what's that?
Like undue racist systems that still do exist in our country,
Yeah, to undo racist systems, right. So, the first concept, right, is this concept of equality of outcome. The challenge that you guys are gonna have with that as a goal is there's no equity in a single family here, right? I just gave you an example of mine. Same parents, same religion, same schools. One brother's in prison, 2 become cops, 3 go join the military. You will not find equity inter-race or external to race. That's a metric for success for police now. It's a challenge because now there's been a metric for success that DOJ has put in place that's not achievable. And the answer to that, they'll agree it's not achievable, but they'll say, isn't it worth trying? That's an economics argument of cost, benefits, and trade-offs, right? That's a very different discussion. But that's part of what's driving progressive police reform and why you guys are gonna find big challenges in trying to implement some of these things that you're seeing come across your legislation. When we talk about honest accountability, anybody disagree with this? That you don't want to put on top of an officer standards, or you do want officers to have clear standards that allow them to predict the lawfulness of their own conduct. Right? You guys were trying to do that earlier. You wanted to solidify. Now you were doing it, I think, because you wanted to constrain the officer's decision making, right? And that's fair. That is one of the things that you're here to be persuasive about. But does anybody disagree that honest accountability requires whatever standard you put on the officer is clear enough that the officer can read it, understand it, apply it, and predict the lawfulness of their own conduct? Anybody disagree with that? I don't think anybody would, right? The other one is whatever the performance expectation can be beyond human performance capabilities. We cannot hold officers accountable to things that no human can do, right? Anybody disagree with that? And so this concept of honest accountability is met with this other concept of corrupt or unjust accountability, which is creating standards that are so vague, lack definition, that no officer can predict the lawfulness of their own conduct. It's beyond human performance capabilities to know what the minimum amount of force necessary is in advance of grabbing somebody, right? In advance of engaging with that person. And yet, that's something you guys have to wrestle with. That's been mandated by your legislation. That's going to be a huge challenge. Here's some of the terms we see. Remember, the Supreme Court said the standard right here. It's one of reasonableness. We understand that there are agencies that want to elevate the standard beyond that of the Constitution, and that's what's happening in California. That's what's happening in some of the other Denver. That's what's happening in D.C. That's what's happening in New Jersey. There are states, there are cities that are trying to elevate the constitutional standard. And these are the terms we see. Now, here's the problem. Going back to unjust accountability. Can any cops tell me what any of this means? And how in advance of using force afterwards, when you're done, you go, well, was it a legitimate use of force? There's no case law on it. The point is, these are immature terms that are being foisted on law enforcement, particularly out here in California. You guys are seeing these. And the question is, what do they mean? How is an officer supposed to know what they mean? Well, we're going to have training on it. What are you training them on? These words were literally just made up. Some of them were taken from international human rights law. Concept of proportionality was a Fourth Amendment concept. It was a balancing of the intrusion on the individual against the government interest being served. That was proportionality. We've somehow made proportionality somehow mean you can't use force that is disproportionate to the underlying resistance or the underlying severity of the offense. And I go, well, how on earth would you know that? You literally cannot template that. So after the fact, you're going to go up to an officer and say, that was disproportional. And they're going to say, okay, I guess that's going to be a challenge. Because these aren't terms that have matured through the system yet. We do see equitable, appropriate, bias-free, must be respectful, must reflect community standards. Those are all not constitutionally required. None of those are constitutionally required except that. Now, sometimes the Supreme Court uses that word necessary, but you know how they end up defining it? Reasonably to be necessary must be reasonable. So they end up taking that word and actually using it alongside here. That poses a challenge. What's that?
Sorry, I mean, I realize that you're basing a lot of I don't mean to interrupt, but I know you're basing a lot of this on like federal law, but there are very clear laws in California that do use these terms. I know that you're saying that maybe there's not as much case law, decades worth of case law, but I mean, some of these laws have been in effect for almost 5 years now. And so there is state law that discusses these terms. There are other policies that use these terms. There are other law enforcement agencies within California that have understood what these terms mean and apply them and train their officers on that. And so I appreciate all of the context that you're giving, but I think that, it'd be really helpful to just better understand, what is AB 392? What does that require for California, right? Because there are, as you've alluded and as you've mentioned in your presentation, there are actual state laws in California. AB 392 on use of force, deadly use of force. There is a necessary standard when you're using deadly use of force. There's FE 30 on de-escalation, and so you may not be from California. And so
no, and I've read it and I understand it, and your point's well taken. 5 years is nothing. 5 years is a blank. 5 years is nowhere near nothing.
But that's what the law is. And,
right, that's right.
And we're here to
Can you finish your presentation?
I will.
Finish your presentation.
Please.
I gotta really
Can we
go,
finish
and if we're gonna go into that now, then.
No, this is important. I will just say this, and we'll keep going. I'm not going to talk about your state law. I'm talking about the challenges across the country that your state law has dove into. You are right. You made my point that you created new terms that haven't been around 5 years, and most of them are really beyond human performance prediction, ability to predict, right? And so you are an attorney. You can look at something and say, not just void for vagueness right off the bat, but it's a factual and legal impossibility. right? And that argument has been made, and in a lot of places it has been made successfully. The challenge you guys have is, it's your law. And so I'm gonna tell you, good luck trying to define these terms with enough sufficiency that an officer will know what it means in advance of using force, instead of using force and then having somebody come in and tell them whether they believe it was proportional, or whether they believe it was necessary or not. Necessary is not defined in the policy yet. I think it needs to be, but your current draft policy doesn't have the word necessary in it, which is a problem, because it sort of becomes a touchstone of what you guys are trying to achieve here. It's just a challenge, right? And I think people need to be sensitive to that, because the cops who are out there right now got dumped a whole bunch of words on them and like, I don't know what that means. I don't know if any human can figure that out in advance. Let me make that point. Bias-free policing, I'm gonna do this fast. Bias-free policing, there's over 200 unconscious or decision-making biases that operate at one time. Do you think there's any technology that allows you to identify what a specific bias is that somebody's operating in on the street? What is the metric for violating that bias-free policing? What is the metric for analyzing it, incorporating it, and strategically removing it? There isn't one. The reality is you're constantly operating in your world, and every decision you make from a biased perspective. That's how you operate in the world. You don't have time to rationally analyze every possible scenario in traffic. You make judgment calls along the way. Threat assessments require that. So if you're looking at me and you're mean mugging me, and you're getting all hostile with me, and I'm gonna have a certain bias against that, right? I'm gonna be like, this is not somebody I trust or somebody I wanna be close. This guy's mean mugging me, he's being mean. How do I separate that from a racial bias? How do I separate that from prejudice bias? How do I separate that from what I call the mean mugging bias? He's not mean mugging, by the way. He doesn't go forward. This is a challenge, is my point. And I took this up with DOJ at the Constitutional Policing Conference. We're having these discussions all the time with DOJ. We're having these discussions at the national levels, and what I'm explaining to you are what the discussion points are. These are not well settled by any stretch of the imagination, and they do not have an answer for it. They will tell you specifically that you cannot test for bias, you cannot train it out of somebody. But we want to try though, right? Just because it's hard doesn't mean we don't try, is their response. Minimum force necessary. Okay, that's the police. You gotta use minimum force necessary. Well, let's talk about that for a second. If you entered a wrestling match and I said you can pin him, but only the minimum force necessary, no, that is the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard of. You're gonna play football, but you can tackle the guy, but only use the minimum force necessary. There's 3 people, at least, one of them fell. There's 3 people tackling this guy. And if that referee comes in after the fact, go, look, I think one of you could have done it. That's an excessive use of force claim because it wasn't the minimum force necessary. How on earth do you know after the fact whether it took 2 or 3 or 1? It is pure speculation. A minimum force necessary requires hindsight that you guys know the Constitution prohibits hindsight analysis of police performance. That's a challenge you guys are going to have to wrestle with. We don't expect minimum force necessary as even a possibility in sports. We don't tell firefighters to use the minimum amount of water necessary to put out a fire. Because we couldn't. You don't know in advance what's going to work or not work. So after the fact, telling somebody they could have done something less is a problem. It's a challenge. So when we change these standards, when we add all these new terms, the question is, are we telling the officers? And we talked about something. You got to build into policy. You got to have the definition sections. You got to start to crystallize it and then ensure whatever those standards are, that the contours are being shaped, that it makes sense, and then you train the officers against those and you hold it to those standards. We're not there yet, not even in California, because this is so new. We'll talk about these challenges. Some of the things we saw, you guys have it in your own policy. I gave an example here where almost every term is being used, right? Chief of Police, what I'm asking you here, why this is important is because we are holding officers accountable to new standards. Do the officers know it? And what are the sources of the new standards? It's not just legislation, although you guys did actually put it in legislation. Prior to getting in legislation, it was coming in through policy, it was coming in through these sources. Like the chief said, I don't think I would have done anything in close case, I just sent it to the trier of fact. That's the opposite. Close cases always inure to the benefit of the officers. That's what the law says. It must be obviously excessive and beyond debate. If reasonable people can debate the reasonableness of the use of force, then the officer wins. That's the law. This chief did it backwards. In close cases, I just sent it to the jury. Agency policy, they shall exhaust all other reasonable means. So the Supreme Court, the federal courts, clearly say, and that's what we're talking about, what is the federal standard, what is traditional law and order? It was preclusion, lower levels of force didn't have to be tried. You don't try lower levels of force and hope for the best. That was the standard. That's changing in California. And the question is, how are you training officers, notifying them of the change and training them? And it's even beyond human performance capabilities, because if it is, if you guys decide no human can do that, then it's not honest accountability. This is another source of change. This is out of New York. There will be riots, there will be fire, there will be bloodshed. If the chief of police instigated lawful investigative measures in New York, the activist said, we'll burn your city. This is another source of influencing police conduct and policy. So when we change, when we're pushing for reform, sometimes like in California, we legislate it. In Colorado, we legislate it. Other places, they don't have that kind of political power. They do it this way. This one was my favorite case, where the civic leader says, I don't care if it was justified. I don't care if it was reasonable, which means it was legal. We didn't need to see another young black male being punched by police on video. This is a change from traditional law and order interests to the progressive social justice or progressive police reform issues. And this is the civic leader saying it out loud. Doesn't matter that it was legal, we have other things we're worried about, other goals, other metrics for success. Are you telling the police this? Because they're finding out about it and they're depolicing in a lot of places, right? That's the challenge. Usually prosecutors are the gatekeepers. Prosecutors keep the bad cases out of court. We understand even prosecutions have become politically charged now. We have prosecutors who are running on a platform where I'm going to go back and find cops to indict. The juries actually inject community standards now. It's another source of how, if you can't get it legislated, if the law doesn't support it, we're still going to hold the officer unjustly or corruptly accountable. We'll just do it through the jury. We will get people on the jury that are anti-police or have bias against police, and we'll let them sort it out, even against the law. And we're seeing cases like this, where she had to know she was holding a gun. Everyone, the prosecution, the defense, the jury, the judge, all agreed. Kim Potter, the taser weapon confusion case, if you don't remember, she thought she had a taser in her hand. Everyone agreed with that. If they agreed with that, she's not guilty. And yet they found her guilty because the jury decided she didn't need to be aware of that. That's a source of change in law enforcement from traditional law and order into something that could predict the lawfulness of their own conduct to something different. Judges do it too. Now we're talking about the federal standard. I'm going to go through that really quickly. I won't go through each of the cases. I have the cases there. I can send them to the flagship cases. They're pretty standard. But here's the deal. The federal courts simply say that police must be reasonable, right? That is very difficult, and you don't really know what it means until you start reading the cases. They also say that excessive force is any force that reasonable people would immediately recognize as excessive. Beyond debate. It has to be obviously excessive, beyond debate. Reasonable people can't disagree, and if they do, like, I might have done something different, well, I would have done it this way, then it's not excessive force legally. The other thing about the feds is it's supposed to be viewed through the lens of the officer, the reasonable officer, but based on training, education, experience, and reasonable inferences. That's a requirement. Giving account to the tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving circumstances, which is why we say, great, if you watch the evolution of some of these changes, the courts were heavily relying on this tense, uncertain, rapidly evolving, and so those who are pushing reform were saying, well, officers need to slow things down, create space, buy time, and negotiate from positions of cover. Stop being in situations that are tense, uncertain, rapidly evolving, and you won't have to shoot so many people. Okay. When you can do that, and we can talk about de-escalation, there are times you can do that, there's times you're not. Cops in the room know sometimes you have to press right now to stop the violence. Other times you can slow things down, create space. We see cases where officers slow things down, create space, and that delay causes them to have to shoot somebody. Where we're looking at it going, you know, if that was the case we were involved in back then, we would have just arrested that person. We wouldn't have slowed things down, created space, bought time, negotiated a position to cover, and allowed them to continue to escalate. We would have taken control of the situation, and I think you guys have that built into your policy, that de-escalation includes physical tactics that you use now that will help you avoid higher levels of force later. That's brilliant. So we talk about federal law as a standard because we want to understand it's built under the Fourth Amendment. That's where the reasonableness standard comes from. It's under totality of the circumstances. You hear the Graham factors. Across the country, they treat Graham versus Connor differently. Some think they're just 3 factors to be considered among all of them. Other courts think, well, the Graham factors don't even apply in some cases. The Supreme Court's one of them. They've analyzed cases, use of force cases, not even talked about Graham. In other cases, they think they are the most important and the only ones, and they do basically, you got 2 Graham factors to your one side, 1 to yours, and then it's unreasonable. The Supreme Court continues to try to flesh that out, but the Graham factors, if you look at the total jurisprudences, they're just 3 factors among totality of circumstances. You can't have totality of circumstances, which means all things considered, and boil it down to 3 factors. That's the point. So what are totality of circumstances? When we talk about analyzing a use of force case, if you want to have an opinion about use of force and you want to understand it and find the contours of it, what that means is you have to understand all the things that cops have to understand. The size disparity, strength disparity, skill disparity, whether the person has a weapon, whether it's uncertain, the severity of the offense is one of them. Is the officer injured that day? What kind of confidence do they have in using a technique? It's like, you want to try the straight arm bar? And you're like, no, I didn't try a straight arm bar. Why not? We taught it to you. Because I suck at it. I'm just not good at it. I have no confidence that I'm going to be able to use that technique and overcome that resistance. Fair enough. That's included in all things considered. Now we also, in all things considered, particularly in California, in the 10th Circuit, we look at the officer's conduct, what we call pre-seizure conduct, right? And so when we're looking at that pre-seizure conduct, say, hey officers, did you do anything that you recognized an unjustifiable risk and you did it anyway? You engaged in a level of recklessness that created the exigency that you then responded to force. That's something to be considered too. We talked about that in officer creating jeopardy issues.
Sorry, just wanted to clarify, we're 9th Circuit, not 10.
I said and also the 10th. Yeah, and also.
I just heard 10.
No, yeah. No, 9th does and also the 10th. Actually, 9th is not as strong on it as the 10th, quite frankly. 10th is probably more strong.
And here's one that basically, Scott Mears, 2007, deadly force case. The Supreme Court tried to reiterate, look, stop with all this stuff. The test is right here. Was it reasonable? And reasonable people can disagree. That's a hard thing. Threat assessments and responses are just educated guesses based on what you know. The one year veteran, the 5-year veteran, the 10-year veteran all have to operate in that same operating environment, and the law allows for that. Allows for you to make better decisions at 5 years and at 10 years without indicting the 1-year officer, right? Because reasonable people can disagree, and it's based on your training, education, experience that you brought into that. Here's the other thing, it's not a rational decision. We don't expect cops to go through this long-term, drawn-out, rational legal analysis. It's very quick. I've seen enough, I gotta make a decision. I've seen this before, I know what to do. It's heuristic decision making, it's very fast. It's system 1 thinking, right? In critical incidents, even the Supreme Court says, we do not expect officers to engage in all these legal conclusions necessary to apply guard to a high-speed chase. But when we evaluate cases, aren't we tempted, the investigators in the room, aren't we tempted to lay down Garner and go step by step and analyze the pros and cons and the trade-offs? That's exactly what we do when we analyze those cases. And the Supreme Court reminds us here in 2015, no, that's not what cops are doing. That's not what we expect of cops. You need to make a reasonable threat assessment and a reasonable response. Not even the best response. Now I understand we're elevating that standard. We're trying to elevate that standard. But I want you to understand the foundation of traditional law enforcement decision making is that lower levels of force didn't have to be tried. Officers of reasonable competence can disagree. And here's a good one, 2021. Use of force must be so well defined that it's clear to a reasonable officer that conduct is unlawful. This is this kind of void for vagueness concept. If you guys are going to throw a whole bunch of terms in, they need to be defined so clearly that an officer can predict the lawfulness of their own conduct. This is every jurisdiction, by the way, federally. I like this one. All this is saying is the inverse. It has to be analyzed from the perspective of the cop. Training, education, experience, and reasonable inferences. Now what the community can do is tell your police, look, there's every tactical decision, every enforcement decision is based on cost, benefits, and trade-offs to the impact on society. And we're telling you, if someone takes off running from you with a gun, we don't want you as a community to chase them. Do not chase them. Okay? And if your community writ large wants to do that, and some jurisdictions are doing that, that's where you can influence policy. It doesn't make it constitutionally infirm to chase them. It's not a constitutional violation, but you can get fired for it. That's where communities can come in. Now, you're saying it's legislated. Actually, that one's probably not legislated here.
But some of these things now are legislated, and there could be different consequences once you guys flesh those things and handle those things out. This is where there's a tension point. The federal standard, traditional law and order interest, if you guys don't know this, the federal standard does not recognize minimum force necessary standards, or preclusion language, or proportionality. All those are new laws, new language that you're putting on top of cops to help them make decisions to elevate it from the constitutional standard. But understand the tension is this is brand new. This is immature. This is something that you guys have a lot of responsibility to get right if you want to elevate the standard beyond that of the Constitution. And it has to be one that is not beyond human performance capabilities. All that's saying is it's all jurisdictions. Yes? 10 minutes. Okay. A couple things I just want to do when we get to the video, because I think that's critical and important. I'll do this fast. Understand action, reaction, what we do at Force Science. When we talk that second concept, is it beyond human performance capabilities? We want to inform your tactics. I want you to understand what you can and cannot do tactically. So you have to understand the threat, and you have to understand the limitations of your response. So that second prong is where we make our living. That's where we do our research. And despite what you may have read in some recent cases that said Force Science has 0 peer-reviewed studies, we have 31 peer-reviewed studies published in some of the highest rated journals in the industry. And we're attacking these issues. And by the way, we have thousands of peer-reviewed studies that undergird our training and our consulting division. Thousands. And so when people tell me that Force Science is pseudoscience, I go, well, you got to be specific. What exactly? We have a standing offer to anybody who can find a Force Science finding or something we rely on that is contradicted or disproven. The experts who testify against us, when we get them on depositions, we ask them that, and they say, no, we're not aware of it. So I'm not aware of what that is, but if you have it, we have a standing offer. Let us know. I am in charge of that. I will pull it off of our website. I will pull it out of our training. So far, no one has done that. Why is that important? Because we make our living identifying human performance limitations for cops and for civilians. So we know when you're assessing a threat how you can respond to it. What I want you to see here is the speed of an assault is about 1/4 second. An officer with his gun in his holster is about 1.7 seconds on a range. That's on a range. That's not facing a real deadly threat. 0.25 to 1.7. Looks like that if the guy doesn't stop firing. Why is that important? We don't want officers to learn to shoot first and ask questions later. We want them to understand the limitations of their own responsibilities and create tactics that don't put them in situations in the first place where they find themselves having to do that. But if they are in that situation, they better do something. They don't have to shoot first, but they better do something. And sometimes that thing might be shooting first.
Stop! Take your hands out your pocket!
I want you to see an animation. I want you to know we
Take
have
your
research
hands out
on
your pocket!
this. And I want you to see this in real life.
If you don't stop, y'all, I'm gonna tase you. I'm not playing. Take your hands out your pocket! Take your hands out your pocket! Take your hands out your pocket!
That was less than 1/4 second. What can that officer do? That officer could not get his gun, his taser pulled fast enough. Even if you have your gun out and pointed at the suspect, it's about 0.83 seconds in a lab. 0.83 seconds in a lab, which means in the real world it's much longer. What does that look like? We know it's 1/4 second for the bad guy. It's about 4 shots. When your gun is already out pointed at the person, they can still get off if they have their hand on the weapon, whether it's at their leg or their waist, they can come up in about 1/4 second on average. It will take you, if your gun is out in a lab, 0.83 seconds. In real life, it's much longer than that. Why is that important? This one right here is, again, I want to show you the animations. I want you to hear the numbers. I want you to feel and see and hear. And then I want you to know this is real life. Now, cops in the room, this is wanted for a drive-by shooting. They're not doing high-risk car stops because that city government decided those were disrespectful. They did not want to have that relationship with the community. So they said no more high-risk car stops. Fast. Her response was over 3 seconds. Now what I want you to see here, that guy hasn't moved at all. That gun came up so fast and fired so fast, he did not move. He could not have blinked that fast. That's how fast that came up. Because you notice he's not even aiming. He's not extending his arm. He's coming up and firing. It's about a little over 1/10 of a second. That officer's brain has not even picked up yet that man has moved. That's the reality of what cops are facing on the street and why they have to control their interactions with people. And they have to say things and do things that might seem disrespectful, because no adult wants to be told what to do as an adult. I'm going to skip that one. That's another example of a SWAT team who are all pointing their guns at the suspect, and he is able to shoot. Okay, the videos are liars. I want to end with this. I need you to understand something critical if you're going to be using body cameras. First of all, what's happening right now with body cameras is they're being weaponized, right? There's a lot of good uses for body cameras. I don't have to tell about the good uses, but I'm going to tell you this. What's happening is there are two things at play. The limitations of human performance in witness statements and memory and perception, and we tell an officer, I need your witness statement. I need you to tell me exactly what happened. But remember, officers are experiencing the event. They're not witnessing the event. They are focused on survival oftentimes. They don't know the distance or the number of punches or the number of shots fired. Sometimes they don't remember if they're in front of the car, behind the car. Their focus of attention is someplace else. And yet when we do the interview, we sometimes forget that. We did it with sexual assault victims for a lot of years. And so when we're interviewing officers, we need to be doing specific types of interviews, right? Trauma-informed forensic interviews that reflect the reality to avoid false confessions and to avoid provoking discombobulation. Right? This is critical to understand the limitations of a witness, but what we're doing is there's going to be inconsistencies in that statement, inconsistencies from the forensic evidence almost every time, and inconsistency between multiple officer statements, and inconsistency between that one officer who gives multiple statements. We get concerned when it's all the same, because we start to think that is not what we'd expect from humans, right? The frailty of memory, the reality of human performance in that regard, we expect certain things. Then we take the forensic evidence from the video, and we imagine that that is the best source of information, and we're going to compare what we see on the video with what the officer said. And here's what's critical about this. We just did a study in Mesa. Let me back up. One of the things we look at is Dr. Mark Green. He's a perception, cognition, decision-making expert in traffic studies. Basically, how long do you need to stop? How does the human perform making quick decisions in traffic conditions? And he takes that and he applies it to policing. He has 33 reasons why you might not see something that is available to be seen in traffic. We've taken that and we found at least 9 of them that apply in most police cases. Here's 9 things that we are at least investigating. Now don't hear me say that these things are held in every case. They're not. What we do is we investigate these cases and we look for evidence consistent with this. If there's an inconsistency between the witness statement and the video, here's where we start to look is, well, maybe the officer literally didn't see it, and here's 9 reasons why they might not have. Some of it's just your focus of attention. I want to focus on 2 of them because these are critical. External obstructions, meaning if my arms are up in a shooting platform, I've cut my field of vision in half. Anything happening down here, I might not see, even though my body cam might see it, right? External obstructions, a car door, my dash. These things will prevent you from seeing something that might be available on a dash cam. It might be available on your body cam. External obstruction is a big one. The other one's attention generally. Where are you looking? What are you paying attention to? If you are not paying attention to that thing in the environment, and you know we have a 1 to 3 degree focal vision, right? That's about the width of your thumb. That's what you're paying attention to when you're externally focused. That's very narrow. Everything else happening out here, we wouldn't expect you to perceive it or to remember it. You don't remember things you didn't perceive. And a lot of things you did perceive, we forget. So I want to focus on these 2 things, and we just did a study. And what we did was we put eye trackers on the officers. And we have them on body cams at the same time, and then we compared the body cam to the eye tracker in a use of force decision-making scenario. On the left is the body cam, on the right is the officer. This is what the officer's looking at. That's 5 degrees, or 0.5 degrees. That's half a degree of visual angle where those dots are. So he's basically looking externally and he's bouncing back and forth. That's what his eye tracker's picking up. You get this. This is your body cam. When you are looking at this, you have a bias to go, well, we're not going to get any information. There's no information for us to consider in the decision at this point. And we sort of blank it out and we forget the officer had information that he was considering. This is the gun being extended in response to a threat, a potential threat. We know over here where the officer's looking. We know the body cam is physically obstructing that field of vision. This is what we have. We will not ever have this. This is what we're judging the officer's decisions from, in part. And imagining and pretending that the body cam
can be used as a proxy for the officer's experience. It cannot be. It cannot be used as a proxy for an officer's experience, focus of attention, and perception. The officer can. Understand this limitation. This is brand new research that's getting published. Hasn't been released yet. But this is going to change the way we train and handle video evidence in court. You can't bring this in and go, look, here's the body cam, but look, the officer is actually looking to his right. His focus of attention went to his partner as they were coming up together. So you got the body cam angled this way, he looks over this way. He cannot be held responsible for anything on that video because he's not looking at it. And you want to hold him off, because that's what we have. Well, hold on, we have to be able to hold him accountable to what's on the body cam. We have to use the body cam and compare it to his witness statement. Well, what good is that? This is where his focus of attention is. To do that is beyond human performance capabilities. This is the body cam. What's not present in this body cam? The suspect who's shooting the gun. The eye tracker picks it up, and then now you're starting to see physical obstructions here, and he's focused right here on the sights. So he is externally narrow focused. If you guys are familiar with Nidafer's attention quadrant, there's external narrow, external broad, internal narrow, internal broad. He is externally focused narrowly on a specific thing, which is his gun sights. Which means, is he seeing any of this or any of this at this point? We wouldn't expect him to because of the accommodation. If you're focused close, you can't be focused far. We will try to hold him accountable to this because that's what we have. This is what the officer is actually available to perceive. When we started looking at all this, thousands of hours of video, something over 75% of the information that the officer relied upon to make a use of force decision, it's like 76%, was not even available on the body cam. Now think about that, investigators, where we look at that body cam and we start to compare it to the officer's witness statement. This is absolutely critical. If you don't understand how important this is, this study right here, this is going to change how body cams are viewed in policing. I won't even ask what your questions are because I know I'm out of time. You guys, thank you very much. Thank you for you guys for your questions. Everyone else will be quiet.
Thank you, Vaughn. Sincerely appreciate it. I want to make sure we left a little bit of time. I know we kind of started late, but we do want to end on time. And so wanted to, again, take about 10 minutes or so, or as long as anyone wants to stay, for that matter, to answer some of those questions. Anything from Vaughn's presentation? Now's time.
Not a question, but I guess just a reflection or comment. I think, again, and this was raised, like, I know you're speaking of just general, like the national standards or what we're talking about, but what we important to inform our work on the policy is we're talking about AB 392. It's like, but so, you know, focusing on just kind of like this is, I think you use a lot about traditional law and order, constitutional is the ground, and
What you're describing is coming next week. My understanding is what you want to discuss, the state-specific stuff, they didn't want me to talk about it all. They wanted me to give you an overview of the challenges that you guys incorporating the state-specific language was things you need to be sensitive to and understand. So yes, 100%, if you're going to say you're more interested in hearing about the state stuff and the application of state stuff and how that applies, that wasn't what I was here to do today, and they told me to stay away from it, but I did study it, and I was seeing, like, I have my slide up there that says, these are the challenges we're seeing across the country. These terms are not defined, certainly not crystallized to a degree where an officer can look at that and know what it means and predict the lawfulness of behavior. You're in the process of doing that, I understand. You're 5 years into it, and that's trickling down.
Well, I mean, the AB 392, sorry, AB 392 does define some of these terms. Like, they are defined by state law, or defined by state law. And, I mean, I think, you know, I had raised this earlier, and this is kind of what Elsa is mentioning, but, you know, like some of the cases that you were citing to, like Graham and the string of cases that sort of follow Graham, with regards to looking at the standard for deadly force, California law said, okay, yeah, cool, we see Graham, but we're gonna elevate that standard to a necessary standard when we're talking about deadly force, and that was not, you know, I mean, I think that, like, without that information, without really understanding AB 392, without really understanding SB 230, and really giving that presentation or really giving that information to CAP members, I think
you'll get, well, has anyone defined necessity?
It's defined by AB 392.
Well, then I would like to know.
I mean, I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. My point is, it's a new term. Necessity requires a level of prediction that officers cannot engage in, literally. No human can. You cannot look at somebody you haven't laid hands on, you don't know the motivation, you don't know the resistance level, you don't know that they have weapons, and then after the fact, when you have all that information available, go, I don't think this was necessary. It requires speculation, right? I mean, it requires hindsight, speculation, analysis, that the officer on the scene, to say it's beyond human performance capabilities is understating it. The reality of threat assessments is an educated guess, and reasonable people who disagree. So if they come in later and go, I don't feel like that was necessary, now knowing everything I know, including the outcome. And I want to make this point because I didn't make it. I think a lot of people evaluating police use of force who have never been involved in threat assessments or responses, and imagine that the outcome is known, that the officer knows they're going to win the fight, and that they get to just choose how they want to win it. The officers going into those fights do not know they're going to win it. They do not know if they're going to get hurt, they're going to get killed. They do not know the outcome. We always know the outcome when we do necessity analysis. It's always after the fact. So I would just encourage everybody to understand, when you're putting these forth, yes, it's legislated. I understand that. But I want you to understand the reality, and I hope I've conveyed that. The reality is that is not a term that I, who have been doing this for over 30 years, would go, well, I have to use only that force which is necessary. And people come to me and go, well, how would I know what that is? I go, I have no idea. In advance of using force and grabbing someone and knowing all these certain predictions, everything's just a guess. Necessity seems to be, and correct me if they defined it differently, that there's a singular best outcome. There's no tactical solution in policing. There's cost, benefits, and trade-offs. There's sometimes a series of bad choices, and you have to make one of them. That's the reality of policing. So I'm not here to re-legislate your statute. That's been done. You have it, it's there, it's being incorporated. I'm here to say, if you are imagining this is not going to be very, very difficult for the police officers to try to wrap their brain around what necessity and minimum and last resort mean, as you guys are defining it, I'm here to tell you that's not the case. It is a very, very difficult thing you guys are trying to do, to blend traditional law and order, which you saw in the federal statutes, that's sort of how states were mirroring that for a while, to blend it with now these progressive reform language. And that's what that is, and you can see the lineage of that. So I just don't want you to take this lightly and think, we define the term on a piece of paper, therefore they can apply it. That is a very, very difficult thing, if not literally beyond human performance capabilities.
I don't think that's what I was saying, but there's a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, for me, what you're saying is, it sounds pretty hopeless. I mean, you're talking on a legal perspective. How does this fit with the idea in Europe when they have a totally different view of the epilepsy? And how about community policing, neighborhood policing? How does that fit in this? Because it's, I mean, maybe you didn't mean to, but to me, it's like I'm going home saying, well, you can never hold any police officer accountable for anything because it's hopeless. You can never know. You can never know anything. It's the way it feels.
Yeah, so I will tell you that the law was set up precisely because of that feeling. Because it is so nearly impossible in that moment to, well, here's what you're stuck with. The reasonableness standard has matured throughout the system for a reason, because it reflected the lack of predictability and the lack of certainty that comes with threat assessments. You now have terminology that you're required to apply that is not matured through the system. So when you're saying what's the point, the other system somebody thought was broken. That's not universally believed. You guys made changes to escalate from a system that was well known into one that is brand new. It is a baby, immature system that is just a social experiment, right? You don't know how it's going to play out.
Yes, but we know there's such a thing as real bias that you can tell because there is something that says, I hate black people, that's bias.
Yeah,
but I understand what you're saying, but you're talking about.
That's racist.
It's so technical that it doesn't seem like it helps us at all to know what to do. It's so technical.
Yeah, I don't want, and maybe if you walk away thinking this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be.
No, I always knew it was hard.
Yeah, that's an important thing because this is incredibly hard for us. We have to debate, when we look at some of these cases, these use of force cases, and we're like, this is a close call. Like, I don't know that I would have done that. But this guy's a one-year cop. He doesn't know what I know. He doesn't train like I train. He hasn't seen what I've seen. I don't know that that was necessary, but I don't know that I can hold him accountable to what I would do 5, 10, 30 years into it. So the system has to allow for that. When we see terms like necessity, and you're like, well, that's impossible, you're telling me we have no hope. You have a very, very tough challenge to apply these terms that require hindsight bias and certainty bias and outcome bias that are all important, which means you already know the outcome. And now you get to evaluate that cop's decision, and he knew none of that. It is challenging. It's going to be very, very tough. And that's really what I wanted to highlight this whole thing was, if you guys are coming in thinking this is like well accepted, easy stuff that we've just decided to now we're going to get better, elevating beyond the constitutional standard is very, very tough because of the lack of predictable uncertainty. So you're right. If you've been out there and you've tried to fight people, some of the hardest people to fight are the ones you least expected to be hard to fight. Your prediction was way off. The longest knockdown, drag out fight might be with the really highly motivated mother who weighs 80 pounds because she is highly motivated not to be arrested. And where the guys who some of the guys you fight, this is hypothetical threat stuff, but some of the guys you fight, they want to look good fighting. So you kind of expect how they're going to stand, how they're going to punch, you kind of know how to do it. Some people who don't do a lot of fighting are really tough to fight because you got elbows coming down. And so how do you overlay a template in threat assessments and responses to that scenario? And I hope I made the point. We don't do it in football. We don't do it in wrestling, but we're trying to do it with police. That's a challenge. That's a huge challenge for you guys.
And if I could just add, just to reiterate again, what the purpose was tonight, again, was to bring Vaughn in, bring Force Science in as just one avenue of information, help educate, provide some additional perspective. Please don't take it, I know there were some things that are obviously always gonna be a little touching and more emotionally challenging, and some differences of opinion, and that's totally fine. Again, the whole purpose of this is for us to get the feedback from you to help answer what you guys wanted in the sense of getting someone outside of BPD telling you, or just hearing strictly from BPD, someone outside of our department from the industry. And so that's, again, what the purpose was. So please don't take it as something where it was designed to strictly just convince you as this is a be-all, say-all type of concept. We completely understand that there's going to be those differences that continue to exist. Again, moving forward, next month, not next week, but next month, we will get in deeper into specifically our policy. And again, it'll be Sergeant Bishop that'll be leading much of that conversation. But we may have some time for some breakout sessions again. Wanted to confirm exactly before, unless there's any other additional questions, the time frame.
Leticia, I would like to
2 hours,
hear
3 hours?
Leticia's question.
I'm sorry, was there another question?
I didn't have a question.
Okay.
I think
I
let's
thought
have
you
it
did
then.
Oh, that was Tap.
No.
Thanks,
Oh,
John.
I thought you had your.
I'm good, I'm good.
You sure? Okay.
Thank you.
Of
What
course.
was your question, Lee?
I just want to make sure everyone was clear on the time and for next 2 hours, 3 hours, I don't know what we were looking at for next one.
Ryan, did you guys talk about that yet?
No, sir.
Did we talk about next meeting? Okay. All right, thank you. Thanks,
Yes,
guys.
sir.
Don't lose hope. Okay. Captain Lakemore is right. This was an effort, although you weren't consulted. And I will acknowledge that you weren't consulted, but I will do that in the future, and we'll collaborate on some of this as they may be necessary. But don't lose hope. I think next month we'll be able to put our perspective in and what we plan to do and how we're going to comply. Your input is really important to us, obviously, and again, this was meant to just provide some education and take what's relevant to you or what you think might be relevant to your recommendations to us, and we'll move on. Let's
Sorry,
talk
just-
about the next meeting, the
Yeah.
hours.
So we're gonna jump straight into the policy. Will there be a chance to actually learn about 392? And, because there is a lot of terms used on what is the federal.
Okay.
But I think because there might be a little bit of confusion of
Where
statewide
is a gap right now that AB 392,
at 2:30.
230, what else?
I mean, I guess I'm curious, like, is there any information that would be helpful as we move into actually looking at the policy?
We can provide some for
I
sure.
understand you usually take the
We can
legal
provide some for sure,
aspects.
yes.
How is those in relation to the stipulated judgment? I'm just trying to.
Say again?
How is all of those laws?
392, well, it's foundational into our use of force and when force is necessary, certainly deadly force, and specific definitions and how we incorporate it into the policy. So it's absolutely relevant. But we can do that, we can talk about that a little bit more as we go. How much time is needed for use of force? Again, big policy, huge foundational thing, and lots of things fall from that. I don't know how much time you guys need for your presentation.
Really comes down to, I would suggest 3 hours, again, if we could do that, but I know that's taxing sometimes on people's personal lives and whatnot, but, that also goes in line with give some time for some breakout sessions, if that is still a desire.
I think it's, I would certainly recommend 3 hours if we can do that, but I also want to make sure that we get some work done too. So, and we can work with, who's the facilitator, Stephanie, isn't it, for the use of force? We can work and structure it where we can actually ensure that we get some structure and we can get some things accomplished. Because again, use of force is a big policy. Not, the ones that are coming behind it aren't nearly as big. They're not going to take the same amount of time. That's very obvious, but use of force is a big one. So I would anticipate perhaps some longer meetings for this in particular. So I would ask for your indulgence in that, but of course, if you guys don't want to meet for 3 hours, then we'll meet for 2. So, but again, use of force is a big part of it. I don't expect the other ones to take nearly the amount of time that use of force actually deserves as well.
So is there a way we can do that 2 hours? I think the 2 hours is a good enough. Everybody's busy and there's like a going home and a lot of things. And plus the focus, people can focus 2 hours more. In 3 hours, I think they're actually wonderful.
Good point.
2.5.
Is there any other feeling about, if there's not a strong feeling to go 3 hours, we're going to leave it back at 2. That's what you guys asked for. We revised it. We'll work within the parameters of the meetings that you guys have done, laid out, and we'll make sure that we make room for the presentation, but also dialogue and discussion for the work to be done as well.
I got no problem with 3 hours.
You don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Okay?
2.5 hours.
I think we tried to do like 5:30 to 8:30 today, but it didn't work. Is 5:30 still good for, that, I recall that was discussed last month.
I think some of us on our calendars that came from Babette still said 6 o'clock, so some of us operate from our calendar.
And I
function on my calendar only. You can send me 1,000 emails, but if you put it on my calendar, I'm just showing up.
Okay.
And I get either some people start leaving, it's no good, it's like when the speaker speaking and some people start leaving, it's no good way to.
No.
We want to be everybody here and this is.
No, again, I want to be respectful of what we're asking you to do, but it's also important that we facilitate the meetings and make sure that we're moving and progress is made. To that end, if you don't already know, the police department is going to be acquiring a service that's going to facilitate the meetings for us. We're going to bring some professionals in that do this type of work, and it will really help support us on the administrative side, developing templates, developing minutes, reporting out, actually facilitating the conversation of the meetings. So they'll be much more structured, much more timely, because this is not what we do. And I think we've proven to you that this is not what we do over the last year. And so I appreciate all of your patience and your indulgence to work with us, but we're going to employ some professionals to come here and do this work, and we'll be here to sit alongside you. But that will be happening as well. We have the RFP, it's going to close out this week or the next. I expect to have that agreement and the new facilitator in place come the first meeting in January, that turn of the year. So stick with me, progress will be made, and we'll get some things done. But again, so I didn't hear kind of a mixed 2.5 or 2. Let's stick with 2. Let's purpose to do that, and if we need to extend the meeting or whatever else, then we can do that.
So we're going 6 to 8?
Is 6 better than 5:30?
Because last time
Well-
we put it at 5:30.
6 to 8 is just kind of ingrained, I think, and I think that was maybe the little bit of a problem. I was here.
Is 5:30 to 7:30 better for everyone?
That
Does it
really
matter?
doesn't matter.
Yes?
For me, 5:30 is no bad, right? Like 5:30.
5:30?
Okay, December the 12th, 5:30. Somebody send Tia a calendar. 5:30. We'll see you December 12th at 5:30. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Standard to a necessary standard when we're talking about deadly force, and that was not, I think that like, without that information, without really understanding AB 392, without really understanding SB 230, and really giving that presentation or really giving that information to CAP members,
I think you'll get, well, has anyone defined necessity?
It's defined by AB 392.
Well, then I would like to know.
I mean, I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. My point is, it's a new term. Necessity requires a level of prediction that officers cannot engage in, literally. No human can. You cannot look at somebody you haven't laid hands on, you don't know the motivation, you don't know the resistance level, you don't know that they have weapons, and then after the fact, when you have all that information available, go, I don't think this was necessary. It requires speculation, right? I mean, it requires hindsight, speculation, analysis, that the officer on the scene, to say it's beyond human performance capabilities is understating it. The reality of threat assessments is an educated guess, and reasonable people who disagree. So if they come in later and go, I don't feel like that was necessary, now knowing everything I know, including the outcome. And I want to make this point because I didn't make it. I think a lot of people evaluating police use of force who have never been involved in threat assessments or responses, and imagine that the outcome is known, that the officer knows they're going to win the fight, and that they get to just choose how they want to win it. The officers going into those fights do not know they're going to win it. They do not know if they're going to get hurt, they're going to get killed. They do not know the outcome. We always know the outcome when we do necessity analysis. It's always after the fact. So I would just encourage everybody to understand, when you're putting these forth, yes, it's legislated. I understand that. But I want you to understand the reality, and I hope I've conveyed that. The reality is that is not a term that I, who have been doing this for over 30 years, would go, well, I have to use only that force which is necessary. And people come to me and go, well, how would I know what that is? I go, I have no idea. In advance of using force and grabbing someone and knowing all these certain predictions, everything's just a guess. Necessity seems to be, and correct me if they defined it differently, that there's a singular best outcome. There's no tactical solution in policing. There's cost, benefits, and trade-offs. There's sometimes a series of bad choices, and you have to make one of them. That's the reality of policing. So I'm not here to re-legislate your statute. That's been done. You have it, it's there, it's being incorporated. I'm here to say, if you are imagining this is not going to be very, very difficult for the police officers to try to wrap their brain around what necessity and minimum and last resort mean, as you guys are defining it, I'm here to tell you that's not the case. It is a very, very difficult thing you guys are trying to do, to blend traditional law and order, which you saw in the federal statutes, that's sort of how states were mirroring that for a while, to blend it with now these progressive reform language. And that's what that is, and you can see the lineage of that. So I just don't want you to take this lightly and think, we define the term on a piece of paper, therefore they can apply it. That is a very, very difficult thing, if not literally beyond human performance capabilities.
I don't think that's what I was saying, but there's a question.
Well, for me, what you're saying is, it sounds pretty hopeless. I mean, you're talking on a legal perspective. How does this fit with the idea of, in Europe, when they have a totally different view of de-escalation? And how about community policing, neighborhood policing? How does that fit in this? Because it's, I mean, maybe you didn't mean to, but to me, it's like I'm going home saying, well, you can never hold any police officer accountable for anything because it's hopeless. You can never know. You can never know anything. It's the way it feels.
Yeah, so I will tell you that the law was set up precisely because of that feeling. Because it is so nearly impossible in that moment to, well, here's what you're stuck with. The reasonableness standard has matured throughout the system for a reason, because it reflected the lack of predictability and the lack of certainty that comes with threat assessments. You now have terminology that you're required to apply that is not matured through the system. So when you're saying what's the point, the other system somebody thought was broken. That's not universally believed. You guys made changes to escalate from a system that was well known into one that is brand new. It is a baby, immature system that is just a social experiment, right? You don't know how it's going to play out.
Yes, but we know there's such a thing as real bias that you can tell because there is something that says, I hate black people, that's bias.
Yeah,
but I understand what you're saying, but you're talking about.
That's racist.
It's so technical that it doesn't seem like it helps us at all to know what it is, but it's so technical.
Yeah, I don't want, and maybe if you walk away thinking this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be.
No, I always knew it was hard.
Yeah, that's an important thing because this is incredibly hard for us. We have to debate, when we look at some of these cases, these use of force cases, and we're like, this is a close call. Like, I don't know that I would have done that. But this guy's a one-year cop. He doesn't know what I know. He doesn't train like I train. He hasn't seen what I've seen. I don't know that that was necessary, but I don't know that I can hold him accountable to what I would do 5, 10, 30 years into it. So the system has to allow for that. When we see terms like necessity, and you're like, well, that's impossible, you're telling me we have no hope. You have a very, very tough challenge to apply these terms that require hindsight bias and certainty bias and outcome bias that are all important, which means you already know the outcome. And now you get to evaluate that cop's decision, and he knew none of that. It is challenging. It's gonna be very, very tough. And that's really what I wanted to highlight this whole thing was, if you guys are coming in thinking this is like well accepted, easy stuff that we've just decided to now we're gonna get better, elevating beyond the constitutional standard is very, very tough because of the lack of predictability and certainty. So you're right. If you've been out there and you've tried to fight people, some of the hardest people to fight are the ones you least expected to be hard to fight. Your prediction was way off. The longest knockdown, drag out fight might be with the really highly motivated mother who weighs 80 pounds because she is highly motivated not to be arrested. And where the guys who some of the guys you fight, and this is hypothetical threat stuff, but some of the guys you fight, they want to look good fighting. So you kind of expect how they're going to stand, how they're going to punch, you kind of know how to do it. Some people who don't do a lot of fighting are really tough to fight because you got elbows coming down. And so how do you overlay a template in threat assessments and responses to that scenario? And I hope I made the point, we don't do it in football, we don't do it in wrestling, but we're trying to do it with police. That's a challenge, that's a huge challenge for you guys.
And if I could just add, just to reiterate again, what the purpose was tonight, again, was to bring Vaughn in, bring Force Science in as just one avenue of information, to help educate, provide some additional perspective. Please don't take it, I know there were some things that are obviously always gonna be a little touching and more emotionally challenging, and some differences of opinion, and that's totally fine. Again, the whole purpose of this is for us to get the feedback from you to help answer what you guys wanted, in the sense of getting someone outside of BPD telling you, or just hearing strictly from BPD, someone outside of our department from the industry. And so that's, again, what the purpose was. So please don't take it as something where it was designed to strictly just convince you as this is a be-all, say-all type of concept. We completely understand that there's going to be those differences that continue to exist. Again, moving forward, next month, not next week, but next month, we will get in deeper into specifically our policy. And again, it'll be Sergeant Bishop that'll be leading much of that conversation. But we may have some time for some breakout sessions again. I wanted to confirm exactly before, unless there's any other additional questions, the time frame.
Natisha, I would like to
2
hear
hours, 3
Natisha's
hours?
question.
I'm sorry, was there another question?
I didn't have a question.
Okay.
Oh, I
think
thought
it was
you
Tabitha.
had your,
Oh, I thought it was Tabitha.
No.
Thanks,
oh,
John.
I thought you had your.
I'm good, I'm good.
Sure? Okay.
Thank you.
What was your question, Dave?
I just want to make sure everyone was clear on the time and for next 2 hours, 3 hours, I don't know what we were looking at for next one.
Ryan, did you guys talk about that yet?
No, sir.
Did we talk about next meeting? Okay. All right, thank you. Thanks,
Yes, sir.
Don't lose hope. Okay. Captain Lakemore is right. This was an effort, although you weren't consulted, and I will acknowledge that you weren't consulted, but I will do that in the future, and we'll collaborate on some of this as they may be necessary. But don't lose hope. I think next month we'll be able to put our perspective in and what we plan to do and how we're going to comply. Your input is really important to us, obviously, and again, this was meant to just provide some education and take what's relevant to you or what you think might be relevant to your recommendations to us, and we'll move on. Let's
Sorry,
talk about the next meeting, the
Yeah.
hours.
So we're gonna jump straight into the policy. Will there be a chance to actually learn about 392? And, because there is a lot of terms used on what is the federal.
Okay.
But I think because there might be a little bit of confusion of
Where
statewide
is a gap right now that AB 392,
at 2:30.
230, what else?
I mean, I guess I'm curious, like, is there any information that would be helpful as we move into actually looking at the policy?
We can provide some for
I
sure.
understand you usually take the
We can
legal
provide some for sure,
aspects.
yes.
How is those in relation to the stipulated judgment? I'm just trying to.
Say again?
How is all of those laws?
392, well, it's foundational into our use of force and when force is necessary, certainly deadly force, and specific definitions and how we incorporate it into the policy. So it's absolutely relevant. But we can do that, we can talk about that a little bit more as we go. How much time is needed for use of force? Again, big policy, huge foundational thing, and lots of things fall from that. I don't know how much time you guys need for your presentation.
Really comes down to what I would suggest 3 hours. Again, some time for some breakout sessions, if that is still a desire.
I think it's, I would certainly recommend 3 hours if we can do that, but I also wanna make sure that we get some work done too. So, and we can work with, who's the facilitator? Stephanie is the use of force. We can work and structure it where we can actually ensure that we get some structure and we can get some things accomplished. Because again, use of force is a big policy. Not, the ones that are coming behind it aren't nearly as big. They're not gonna take the same amount of time. That's very obvious, but use of force is a big one. So I would anticipate perhaps some longer meetings for this in particular. So I would ask for your indulgence in that, but of course, if you guys don't wanna meet for 3 hours, then we'll meet for 2. So, but again, use of force is a big part of it. I don't expect the other ones to take nearly the amount of time that use of force actually deserves as well.
So is there a way we can go that 2 hours? I think the 2 hours is a good enough. Everybody's busy and there's like a going home and a lot of things. And plus the focus, people can focus 2 hours more. In 3 hours, I think they're actually wonderful.
Good point.
2.5.
Is there any other feeling about, if there's not a strong feeling to go 3 hours, we're gonna leave it back at 2. That's what you guys asked for. We revised it. We'll work within the parameters of the meetings that you guys have done, laid out, and we'll make sure that we make room for the presentation, but also dialogue and discussion for the work to be done as well.
I got no problem with 3 hours.
You don't have a problem with it.
Yeah,
Okay?
2.5 hours.
I think we tried to do like 5:30 to 8:30 today, but it didn't work. Is 5:30 still good for, that, I recall that was discussed last month.
I think some of us on our calendars that came from Babette still said 6 o'clock, so some of us operate from our
for tonight?
calendar.
And I
I
forgot
function
to
on my
update it.
calendar only. You can send me 1,000 emails, but if you put it on my calendar, I'm
Got
not
it.
showing up.
Okay.
And I get either some people start leaving, it's no good, it's like when the speaker speaking and some people start leaving, it's no good way to.
No.
We want to be everybody here and this is.
No, again, I want to be respectful of what we're asking you to do, but it's also important that we facilitate the meetings and make sure that we're moving and progress is made. To that end, if you don't already know, the police department is going to be acquiring a service that's going to facilitate the meetings for us. We're going to bring some professionals in that do this type of work, and it will really help support us on the administrative side, developing templates, developing minutes, reporting out, actually facilitating the conversation of the meetings. So they'll be much more structured, much more timely, because this is not what we do. And I think we've proven to you that this is not what we do over the last year. And so I appreciate all of your patience and your indulgence to work with us, but we're going to employ some professionals to come here and do this work, and we'll be here and sit alongside you. But that will be happening as well. We have the RFP, it's going to close out this week or the next. I expect to have that agreement and the new facilitator in place come the first meeting in January, that turn of the year. So stick with me, progress will be made, and we'll get some things done. But again, so I didn't hear kind of a mixed 2.5 or 2. Let's stick with 2. Let's purpose to do that, and if we need to extend the meeting or whatever else, then we can do that.
So we're going 6 to 8.
Is 6 better than 5:30?
I think this is being the right time. Because last time
Well-
people said 5:30.
6 to 8 is just kind of ingrained, I think, and I think that was maybe the little bit of a problem. I was here.
Is 5:30 to 7:30 better for everyone?
That
Does it
really
matter?
doesn't matter.
Yes?
For me, 5:30 is no bad, right? Like 5:30, that's.
Okay, December the 12th, 5:30. Somebody send Tia a calendar. 5:30. We'll see you December 12th at 5:30. All right, thank you.
Thank you.